In the void between stars, reality screams. A wound opens in hyperspace, not clean, not natural. Something immense tears through the membrane of existence itself. The Force shudders. Across 1,000 worlds, Jedi wake gasping. Sith Lords pause mid-breath, sensing something that should not be. On the bridge of a Venator-class star destroyer, sensors shriek warnings. A contact, massive, organic, impossible. In the debris field of a shattered moon, a figure stands 9 feet of ceramite and fury, wreathed in the dying embers of warp fire. His armor is cracked. His weapon hums with impossible energy. His eyes scan a galaxy he does not recognize. Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the 13th Legion, Lord Commander of the Imperium, has crossed an ocean of unreality and found himself in a war that wears the mask of righteousness. But beneath it, he will uncover a corruption that would make even the ruinous powers envious. This is Galaxy of Titans. The hyperspace route above Christophsis had been stable for 10,000 years. Then it screamed. Captain Rex felt it before the sensors registered a wrongness that crawled up his spine and made his trigger finger twitch. On the bridge of the Resolute, claxons erupted in a cascade of warning lights. The viewport, which had shown the familiar blue-white tunnel of hyperspace transit, suddenly fractured with veins of purple and red. "Sir," the navigation officer's voice cracked. "We're reading a spatial anomaly directly ahead." "Mass readings are that can't be right." General Anakin Skywalker was already moving toward the viewport, his hand instinctively reaching for his lightsaber. The Force had gone cold around him, like standing at the edge of an abyss that stared back. "Drop us out of hyperspace, now." The Resolute shuddered as it translated back into real space, followed by the rest of the Republic fleet. What greeted them defied explanation. A wound hung in space above the crystalline planet, not a black hole, not a nebula, but a tear. Reality itself had been ripped open, edges flickering with impossible colors that hurt to perceive. Energy bled from it in waves that made the ship's hull groan. Through the rift, something massive was emerging. Admiral Ultramarine gripped the command console. "Energy readings are off every scale. That's not separatist technology. That's not anyone's technology." Ahsoka Tano stood beside her master, her montrals aching from the Force distortion. "Master, I can feel something in there. Something alive." The figure that stepped through the wound was titanic, 9 feet of burnished gold and cobalt blue, wreathed in dissipating energy that crackled like dying stars. The armor was Baroque, covered in eagles and script in a language that predated any known civilization. One massive gauntleted hand gripped a sword that blazed with cold fire, not a lightsaber, but something that made the same hum of impossible physics. The other hand was a power fist, large enough to crush a battle droid in a single motion. But it was the face that held Anakin transfixed. Beneath a laurel crown worked into the armor's helmet, a face of perfect, terrible humanity stared out at the fleet. Chiseled features, blue eyes that assessed everything with the speed of a tactical computer, a jaw set with the weight of 10,000 battles. This was no droid, no alien species in the Republic database. This was something else entirely, something more. "Hail them," Anakin ordered, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. The communications officer worked frantically. "Trying all frequencies, General. Standard Republic protocols, binary, even Huttese." No response. "Wait, I'm getting something. It's not audio. It's data? Some kind of encoded pulse." On the main display, text appeared in High Galactic, as if translated by the mysterious warrior's own systems. Identify, designation, allegiance, threat, assessment status. Rex stepped forward, his training overriding his awe. "That's military protocol. Whoever, whatever that is, It's a soldier. Anakin made a decision. Open a channel, full visual. He stepped into the holocam's range, deliberately keeping his hands visible and away from his lightsaber. This is General Anakin Skywalker of the Galactic Republic. You've entered Republic space during a time of war. Identify yourself. For a long moment, nothing. The figure hung in space, suspended by technology that shouldn't exist. No jetpack visible, no propulsion signature, just perfect, impossible stillness. Then the figure's lips moved, and a voice like an avalanche rolled across every speaker on the bridge. I am Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the 13th Legion, Lord Commander of the Imperium of Man. Each word was precisely articulated, carrying an authority that made Republic admirals sound like uncertain children. I require immediate tactical briefing. Current galactic political structure, active conflict zones, nearest Imperial assets, and status of the Emperor's domain. Silence gripped the bridge. Imperial? Yularen whispered. The only empire in recent history was dissolved 1,000 years ago. Ahsoka felt the wrongness deepen. Master, he's not from here. I don't mean another system, I mean he's not from here. The force around him is fractured, like he's standing in one reality while belonging to another. Anakin's mind raced. A super soldier from another dimension, arriving in the middle of the Clone Wars, asking for an empire that didn't exist. The implications were staggering, but his instincts, both as a Jedi and as a warrior, told him one crucial thing. This being, this Guilliman, was analyzing them with the same intensity they analyzed him, and finding them wanting. There is no Imperium of Man here, Anakin said carefully. You're in the Galactic Republic, currently engaged in civil war against the Separatist Alliance. As for an emperor, we're a democracy. Through the viewport, they watched Guilliman's expression shift. Not surprise, something closer to disappointment. His eyes tracked across the fleet, cataloging every ship, every weapon placement, every tactical formation with inhuman speed. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of terrible understanding. A republic fighting a civil war, clone soldiers, warrior monks leading armies. His gaze locked onto Anakin, and for a moment, the Jedi felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with the Force. I have witnessed this pattern before. Tell me, General Skywalker, when your war ends, what do you believe will emerge from the ashes? Before Anakin could respond, alarms shrieked across the fleet. Separatist ships were translating out of hyperspace on the opposite vector, a full invasion force. Lucrehulk-class battleships leading waves of frigates and droid fighters. General Grievous had arrived to claim Christophsis. The holographic image of the cyborg general materialized on Confederate flagships, his vocabulator crackling with mechanical laughter. Republic forces, this system is forfeit. Surrender and your soldiers will be... He stopped. His optical sensors focused on the impossible figure floating in space. What? What is that? Guilliman rotated in space with impossible precision, his armor systems locking on to the Separatist fleet. The massive sword in his hand began to glow brighter, and energy readings across both fleets spiked to dangerous levels. Automated war forms, Guilliman assessed, his voice cutting across all channels simultaneously. Apparently, his armor could override any communication system at will. Suboptimal organic leadership augmented with mechanical components, mass production military doctrine, expendable asset deployment. His eyes narrowed, and when he spoke next, it was with the cold certainty of a being who had fought in wars that would make the Clone Wars look like a skirmish. Inefficient, predictable, acceptable for preliminary assessment. The hand of Dominion raised, servos whining with power that could shatter tank armor. I will require combat data. You will provide it. And Roboute Guilliman, Lord Commander of an Imperium that did not exist in this reality, launched himself at the Separatist fleet with the fury of a demigod who had been bred for one purpose since birth: to make war and to win. On the bridge of the Resolute, Anakin Skywalker ignited his lightsaber and turned to his crew. All ships, combat formation, whatever he is, he just picked our side. Rex, prepare boarding parties. This fight just got interesting. Through the Force, Ahsoka felt the galaxy itself recoil from what had entered it. Something vast and terrible and utterly without mercy. Something that would not stop until it understood every variable, every faction, every hidden truth, and the Clone Wars, already a conflict of deception and manipulation, had just gained a player who would accept nothing less than total strategic clarity. The wound in reality had brought them a warrior, but warriors, Ahsoka realized with growing dread, ask questions, and this one would not accept comfortable lies. Guilliman moved through the vacuum like a bullet with purpose. His armor's thrusters, powered by mechanisms that drew from principles this universe had never conceived, propelled him across the 15-kilometer gap in seconds. Battle droids registered the incoming target too late. Their processing cores couldn't categorize what their sensors showed: organic, armored, moving at speeds that violated their threat assessment parameters. The first Vulture droid that intercepted him simply ceased to exist. The hand of Dominion crushed its central chassis with such force that the explosion was visible from both fleets. Guilliman used the debris as cover, his tactical interface still functional despite dimensional translation painting target priorities across his vision. 12 more fighters. Optimal termination sequence already calculated. He killed them all in 90 seconds. On the Resolute, Captain Rex watched the combat feed with the stunned silence of a man witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. The Golden Warrior moved with a precision that made elite clone commandos look clumsy. Every motion was economical, every strike catastrophic. No wasted energy, no excess movement. That's not fighting, Rex muttered. That's execution. Like he's following a formula. Because he is, Anakin said, his eyes tracking Guilliman's trajectory. Through the Force, he could feel the being's presence cold, ordered, utterly without chaos, like staring at a mathematical proof given physical form. He's not reacting to the droids. He already knows what they'll do. Ahsoka shook her head in wonder. How is that possible? He's never fought them before. Pattern recognition, Admiral Yularen supplied, professional respect creeping into his voice. Those droids follow predictable tactical protocols. He analyzed their formation, extrapolated their programming, and executed a counter-strategy before they could adapt. On the tactical display, Guilliman had reached the nearest Separatist frigate. Instead of breaching the hull, which would have been the expected move, he landed on the dorsal surface and began walking toward the bridge with deliberate, measured steps. His armored boots clanged against the hull with each stride, and behind him, entire sections of the ship began to fail. "What's he doing to their ship?" the sensor officer called out. "Their power grid is cascading, navigation systems offline, weapons, they're all going dark." Rex leaned closer to the display. "He's pulling their power conduits as he walks. Look, he's ripping them out through the hull plating." It was brutally simple. Guilliman's gauntlets tore through the frigate's exterior like parchment, yanking critical systems free with the casual efficiency of a technician dismantling a defective servitor. He wasn't destroying the ship, he was disassembling it, rendering it combat ineffective without wasting ammunition or energy. The Separatist fleet began to react, redirecting fire toward the lone figure. Turbo laser batteries opened up, filling space with emerald death. Guilliman's armor flared with energy impacts that should have vaporized him. He continued walking. The Emperor's sword swept up, and reality bent. A turbo laser bolt struck the blade and refracted at an impossible angle, slamming back into the ship that had fired it. Guilliman's armor wasn't just absorbing the hits, it was redistributing energy through systems that operated on physics this galaxy had never mastered. Impossible, Yularen breathed. Those are capital ship-grade weapons. Nothing that size should survive. He's not from here, Anakin repeated, feeling the truth of it in his bones. Whatever made him, whatever universe he comes from, it built things to survive worse than this. On General Grievous's command ship, the cyborg general slammed all four hands against his command console. All batteries, focus fire, scramble all fighter squadrons. I want that thing atomized. 1,000 droid fighters swarmed toward Guilliman like metallic locusts. The Primarch stopped walking and turned to face them, and for the first time since arriving, he spoke again, not to any fleet, but to himself. A habit ingrained from 100 campaigns. Swarm tactics. Numerical superiority doctrine. No capital ship support fire due to friendly fire risk. His voice was analytical, almost bored. Exploitable. He thrust the Emperor's sword into the frigate's hull, using it as an anchor point, and raised the hand of Dominion toward the incoming swarm. His armor's remaining power reserves channeled through the weapon, and what emerged wasn't a laser, wasn't a plasma bolt, it was a pulse of raw kinetic force that propagated through the vacuum like a shockwave. 300 droid fighters crumpled simultaneously, their frames compressed into scrap by invisible pressure. The remaining fighters halted in space, their AI cores trying and failing to recalculate threat parameters. In that moment of hesitation, Republic V-wings swept in from the Resolute, turbo lasers and proton torpedoes cutting through the confused separatist formation. Guilliman watched the Republic ships engage with the same cold assessment he'd given the droids. His enhanced vision cataloged everything: flight patterns, formation discipline, targeting efficiency, pilot skill variance. All of it was adequate. Barely. General Skywalker. His voice cut through the Republic command channel with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed by millions. Your fighter screen is overextended. Pull back squadrons Trill and Axe to cover your flagship's port ventral. The enemy will attempt a flanking maneuver in 40 seconds. On the bridge, Anakin's jaw tightened. Part of him wanted to argue he'd been fighting this war for 3 years, had earned his reputation as one of the Republic's finest tacticians. But another part, the part that understood war as a language spoken in blood and strategy, recognized the certainty in Guilliman's voice. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a prediction. Rex, relay those orders, Anakin said quietly. 37 seconds later, a squadron of separatist bombers translated out of hyperspace exactly where Guilliman had indicated, only to fly directly into the redirected Republic fighters. Admiral Yularen stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. He saw that coming. How? Fleet positioning, Guilliman's voice continued, now addressing the entire Republic task force as if they were under his command. Your capital ships are deployed in a defensive sphere, tactically sound for sustained engagement, but vulnerable to concentrated breaching tactics. Recommend immediate reformation. Hammer and anvil configuration. Venators forward. Support frigates in echelon formation. Medical vessels behind the gravitic shadow of the gas giant. Who does he think he is? One of the Republic captains protested over the command channel. We don't take orders from... The protest cut off as a separatist battleship began its attack run, aimed directly at the formation's weak point, exactly where Guilliman had implied. Anakin made a decision that would ripple through the entire engagement. All ships execute the maneuver. Now, the Republic fleet shifted with practiced efficiency, and what should have been a devastating separatist breakthrough became a killing field. Venator-class Star Destroyers brought their full broadsides to bear, while support ships hammered the exposed Confederate vessels from optimal firing angles. In 6 minutes, the Separatist assault formation collapsed. Grievous, watching his tactical advantage evaporate, let out a mechanical roar of frustration. "Who is that? What manner of Republic weapon? He is not ours," a cold voice interrupted. Count Dooku materialized via hologram on Grievous's bridge, his aristocratic features tight with concern. "I sense nothing from him. The Force is silent where he stands, as if he is a void wrapped in flesh and metal." "Then we destroy him," Grievous snarled. "No." Dooku's eyes were distant, calculating. "We retreat. Immediately." This variable was not accounted for. Lord Sidious must be informed. "Retreat? We outnumber them 3-2. Now, General." The Separatist fleet began its hyperspace withdrawal, leaving behind destroyed frigates and thousands of droid fighters. It was a tactical retreat, but it felt like something else. It felt like fear. Guilliman watched them flee, his expression unchanging. He retrieved the Emperor's sword from the disabled frigate and activated his armor's thrusters, propelling himself back toward the Republic fleet. As he approached the Resolute, his enhanced hearing picked up dozens of comm channels simultaneously, clone troopers discussing him, Republic officers debating his arrival, Jedi Knights conferring in hushed, worried tones. He had analyzed them during the battle. Now came the true assessment. The Resolute's hangar bay opened, and Guilliman descended into it with controlled precision. The moment his boots touched the deck, 100 clone troopers snapped to attention, not because they'd been ordered, but because military instinct recognized command presence when it stood before them. Anakin Skywalker strode down the hangar ramp, flanked by Ahsoka Tano and Captain Rex. The Jedi's hand rested near his lightsaber, not threatening, but ready. Wise, Guilliman deactivated his armor's external systems, allowing the energy field to dissipate. Up close, his size was even more imposing. He towered over Anakin, who was himself taller than most humans. The Primarch's eyes swept across the assembly. The Jedi, the clone captain, the dozens of identical soldiers standing in perfect formation. Perfect. Identical. Owned. Something cold settled in Guilliman's chest. "You fight well," Anakin said, his tone carefully neutral. "That was some of the most impressive combat I've ever witnessed. Your tactical doctrine is inefficient but adaptable," Guilliman replied, his voice echoing in the cavernous hangar. "Your soldiers are well trained but underutilized. Your command structure is..." He paused, his gaze shifting to the clone troopers. "Problematic." Rex stiffened. "Sir, we've won countless battles using..." "You've survived countless battles," Guilliman corrected. "Despite your command structure, there is a difference." He turned to Anakin. "You are a Jedi." "Yes?" "A warrior-monk tradition, force-sensitive, telekinetic and precognitive abilities. That's one way to describe it," Ahsoka said warily. "And yet you lead armies." Guilliman's tone wasn't accusing, merely stating a tactical contradiction. Warrior monks are assassins, champions, shock troops, not field commanders, not strategists. Your organizational doctrine contradicts your operational capabilities. Anakin felt heat rising in his chest. "We do what the Republic needs." "We, the Republic?" Guilliman's eyes narrowed. "Tell me about this Republic. Its structure, its governance, the nature of this civil war." He gestured to the clones. "And tell me about them. These soldiers who share identical faces, identical voices, identical genetic markers." The hangar went silent. Captain Rex found himself speaking before he could stop himself, compelled by something in the giant warrior's presence, the certainty of someone who would accept nothing less than truth. "We're clones, sir, grown on Kamino from a single template, bred and trained for combat." "Bred," Guilliman repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Trained. Since what age? Since decanting, sir. We mature at twice the normal rate. Battle ready in 10 years. Guilliman's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Those who knew how to read a Primarch's face, and there were none in this galaxy, would have recognized the expression fury, cold, controlled, and absolute. And what happens to you when the war ends, Captain? Do you receive land? Pensions? The rights of citizenship? Rex hesitated. We serve the Republic, sir. That's what we were made for. Made, Guilliman said, and the word carried the weight of a death sentence. He turned to Anakin, and the Jedi saw something in those ancient eyes that made him take an involuntary step back. Not hatred, worse. Recognition. I know what this is, Guilliman said quietly. I have seen this pattern play out across 1,000 worlds, in 1,000 wars. A republic fighting for its survival, creating slave soldiers to defend its ideals, justifying atrocity in the name of necessity. His voice hardened. Tell me, General Skywalker, when your war ends and your republic stands victorious, what do you think will emerge? What system do you imagine will rise from a foundation built on the backs of men, bred to die? Anakin opened his mouth to respond, but no words came, because deep down, in a place he rarely let himself acknowledge, he knew the answer, and it terrified him. Guilliman looked past the Jedi, past the clones, toward the stars visible through the hangar's atmospheric shield. I need to speak with your government, he said. Your Senate, your leadership. Because I have fought in wars like this before, General, and I know how they end. His eyes returned to Anakin, cold and certain. They end in empire. The Jedi Temple had stood for 1,000 generations, a monument to peace and contemplation. Its towers reached toward Coruscant's polluted sky like prayers made manifest. Within its highest chamber, the Jedi Council gathered in emergency session, and for the first time in living memory, they did so in fear. Master Yoda sat in his customary seat, eyes closed, feeling the disturbance that had shaken the Force like a bell struck by a hammer. Around him, the greatest Jedi Masters of the age flickered in holographic blue Mace Windu from the Outer Rim, Plo Koon from the Northern campaigns, Obi-Wan Kenobi from Mandalore negotiations. Only Ki-Adi-Mundi and Shak-Ti were physically present, standing near the chamber's center where a tactical hologram rotated. The hologram showed Guilliman, frozen in mid-combat above Christophsis, 9 feet of armored fury, captured in perfect detail. Felt him, we all did, Yoda said softly, his ears drooping. A wound in the Force, a presence that should not be. Mace Windu's hologram crossed its arms. Anakin's report is troubling. This being, this Guilliman, fought with a precision we've never encountered, not Force-enhanced. Something else entirely. His armor alone represents technology centuries beyond our most advanced systems, Ki-Adi-Mundi added, gesturing to detailed scans. The energy signatures don't match any known power source, and his weapon, this Emperor's Sword, generates a field that our sensors classify as impossible. Shak-Ti stepped forward, her voice measured. But it's what he said that concerns me most. I have witnessed this pattern before. He looked at our clone troopers and saw slavery. He looked at our republic and predicted empire. Prophecy? Plo Koon suggested. Analysis, Obi-Wan corrected, his hologram showing the weariness of too many battles. I've reviewed the tactical footage. This being doesn't use the Force, but he reads military doctrine the way we read emotions. He saw our entire command structure and diagnosed it like a physician identifying disease, and found it wanting. Mace finished grimly. He called our use of Jedi as generals contradictory. Our clone army, problematic. Everything about how we fight this war he views as fundamentally flawed. Yoda opened his eyes. Because right, he may be. The chamber fell silent. Master Yoda? Shakti's voice carried shock. Blind. We have become, the ancient Jedi said, each word weighted with centuries of wisdom and bitter acknowledgement. To the darkness, yes, but also to ourselves. Warriors, we have become. Generals, comfortable with armies of slaves we are, though call them by another name. We do. They're not slaves, Ki-Adi-Mundi protested. The clones serve willingly, because chose it, they did. Yoda interrupted, his gaze sharp. Or because created for it, they were. Know the difference, do you? Numb. Before the debate could deepen, the chamber doors hissed open. Anakin Skywalker strode in, his robes still bearing scorch marks from the battle. Behind him, moving with predatory grace, came Roboute Guilliman. The Primarch had to duck to enter the chamber, his armored bulk making the sacred space feel suddenly cramped. His eyes swept across the assembled masters with clinical precision, categorizing, assessing, measuring. Several Jedi unconsciously stepped back. Masters, Anakin said formally. Lord Commander Guilliman has requested an audience. He wishes to understand the nature of our conflict before deciding his allegiance. Allegiance. Mace Windu's hologram turned to face the towering warrior directly. You speak as if you have a choice in the matter. You're in Republic space, during a Republic war. We've welcomed you, but don't mistake that for negotiation. Guilliman's expression didn't change. I mistake nothing, Master Windu. I am a soldier without an army in a galaxy at war. You need every advantage. I represent a significant tactical asset that grants me the luxury of choice. He paused, and the responsibility to choose wisely. Yoda's ears perked up. Responsibility. Weight it carries for you, does it? All command carries weight, Guilliman replied, his eyes meeting the ancient masters. The weight of every life spent, every decision made, every compromise accepted. His gaze shifted to encompass the entire council. I have ruled star systems, led armies millions strong, built civilizations from the ashes of old night. I understand the burden of leadership, and yet you question ours, Shakti observed. I question all leadership, including my own. Guilliman stepped toward the central hologram, his armor servos whispering. Your clone troopers explain their creation, the decision-making process, the ethical framework that justified breeding sentient beings for combat. The council exchanged glances. Finally, Mace spoke. The clone army was commissioned by Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, though the details remain unclear. When the Separatist crisis began, the army was available. Necessary. Convenient, Guilliman corrected coldly. An army appears exactly when needed, commissioned by a dead man, and you questioned none of it. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen conspiracy and manipulation topple empires. In my experience, convenient solutions to existential crises are rarely solutions at all. Obi-Wan's hologram leaned forward. What are you implying? I imply nothing. I state facts. Guilliman gestured to the tactical displays showing the Clone War's sprawling fronts. You fight a war across thousands of systems. Your enemy deploys droid armies easily replaced, mathematically predictable. You deploy clone soldiers, limited supply, lengthy maturation, strategically finite. This is not a war designed to be won. This is a war designed to be sustained. Designed? Ki-Adi-Mundi shook his head. Wars aren't designed. They erupt from political failure. From Mound. Ki-Adi-Mundi. Ki-Adi-Mundi. Every war is designed by someone, Guilliman interrupted, his voice carrying absolute certainty. Resources must be marshaled, logistics coordinated, industrial capacity redirected. Someone organized this conflict. Someone benefits from its continuation. His eyes narrowed. Find that someone, and you find the true enemy. Yoda's walking stick tapped the floor. Clouded, the future is. Difficult to see. The Sith hand behind this war. Guilliman's head snapped toward the ancient master. Sith? An ancient enemy, Mace explained. Force users who embrace darkness and passion. We believed them extinct for a millennium, but they've returned. Their hand guides the Separatists, though we don't yet know their full plan. Dark Force users manipulating a galactic civil war from the shadows. Guilliman's voice went flat. And your response is to assume command of armies and fight their puppets directly? We protect the Republic, Shaak Ti began. You enable their strategy, Guilliman cut her off. If your enemy wants prolonged conflict, you give it to them by engaging conventionally. If they want the Jedi militarized, you accommodate by becoming generals. If they want the Republic dependent on slave soldiers, you facilitate by accepting the clone army without question. He turned in a slow circle, addressing each master. Tell me, what action have you taken that wasn't reactive? What strategy have you pursued that wasn't handed to you? The silence was damning. Nothing, Guilliman concluded. You are fighting your enemy's war, by their rules, on their terms. And you call this victory whenever you hold a system for another month. Anakin felt anger surge through him, not at Guilliman, but at the truth in his words. How many times had he felt this same frustration? The sense that they were playing a game whose rules they didn't understand, fighting battles that won nothing of strategic value, chasing an enemy that always seemed one step ahead? In the shadows of Coruscant's deepest political chambers, a different conversation was taking place. Chancellor Palpatine stood before a hollow projection of Count Dooku, his expression troubled in a way few ever witnessed. This Guilliman presents an unexpected variable. More than unexpected, my lord, Dooku replied, his cultured voice tight with concern. I attempted to read him through the Force during the battle. There was nothing, not emptiness, like with the Yu Zhan Vong of legend, absence. As if he exists in a space where the Force cannot reach. A being immune to Force influence. Palpatine's eyes glittered. That could be useful, or catastrophic. He is also dangerously perceptive. His analysis of the war's structure came within moments of observation. If he continues examining our operations. Dooku left the implication hanging. Palpatine steepled his fingers. Then, we must ensure his examination leads where we wish it to lead, or we must eliminate him. Elimination may prove difficult. The energy readings from his armor suggest durability beyond anything we've encountered. Even a lightsaber might not. There are other methods, Palpatine said softly. This warrior speaks of empires and leadership. He understands power. Perhaps he can be made to see that the Republic's transformation is not a corruption to be prevented, but an evolution to be guided. Dooku bowed slightly. And if he refuses, then he becomes a cautionary tale. The Chancellor's expression shifted, becoming the concerned statesman once more. But first, we learn what he knows, what universe he comes from, what weapons and technologies he might share. Knowledge, Lord Tyrannus, is always the first conquest. The hologram faded, leaving Palpatine alone in the darkness, his mind already working through a dozen scenarios. This Guilliman was dangerous, a tactical genius who might unravel carefully laid plans, or a potential asset who could accelerate them. The Sith Lord had spent decades orchestrating this moment. He would not allow an interdimensional warrior to derail it, but neither would he waste such an opportunity. Back in the council chamber, Guilliman had moved to the viewport, staring out at Coruscant's endless cityscape. Trillions of beings, stacked in towers that reached the clouds, all of them dependent on a political system that was already crumbling. Your republic is dying, he said quietly, not turning from the view. Not from the separatist rebellion, from its own weight, from corruption, bureaucratic paralysis, the disconnect between ideals and actions. He finally turned to face the council. I have seen republics fall before. The pattern is always the same: crisis, militarization, the willing surrender of freedom for security. And then, when the crisis passes, if it ever does, those who saved the Republic discover they've transformed into something else entirely. You speak from experience, Obi-Wan observed. I speak from history, repeating endless, across every civilization that rises and falls. Guilliman's voice carried a weight of profound weariness. My own father, my emperor. He unified humanity through conquest, created an imperium that spanned the galaxy, brutally efficient, absolutely authoritarian, and utterly necessary, we believed, to survive the darkness. And did it? Yoda asked softly. Survive? Did your imperium? Guilliman's silence was answer enough. I don't know how I came to be here, he finally said. The last thing I remember is the warp, a realm of nightmares and corruption in my reality tearing open around my fleet. And then, this, your galaxy, your war, your dying republic. His eyes hardened, but I will not stand idle while history repeats itself. I will not watch another civilization walk willingly into tyranny while congratulating itself on necessary sacrifice. Then what do you propose? Mace challenged. Transparency, truth, a complete strategic reassessment of this entire conflict. Guilliman straightened to his full, imposing height. Allow me to examine your military structures, your political systems, your enemy's operations. Give me full access to your strategic data, and I will show you what you're truly fighting. That's impossible, Ki Adi-Mundi protested. Military secrets, classified operations, are meaningless if you lose the war. Or worse, win it and lose yourselves. Guilliman's gaze swept across them all. You want my help? You want the advantage I represent? Then show me you're worth saving. Prove to me that this republic deserves to survive. The challenge hung in the air like a blade. Yoda's eyes closed, sensing the crossroads before them. This being, this warrior from another reality, was offering them a mirror, harsh, uncompromising, reflecting truths they'd avoided for 3 long years of war. But mirrors, the ancient master knew, revealed not just what was, but what could be. Speak with the Chancellor you must, Yoda finally said. If trust you, the Council does, then meet with the Senate, you should. See the Republic's heart for yourself. Judge us by more than our armies. Guilliman nodded slowly. Acceptable. Arrange the meeting. As the council session ended and the masters began filing out, Anakin moved beside the towering Primarch. You're not going to find what you're looking for, he said quietly. The Senate is just politicians arguing. The real war is out there, on the front lines. The real war, Guilliman replied, his eyes distant, is always in the halls of power, General Skywalker. Battles are won by soldiers. Wars are won by those who control the soldiers. He looked down at the young Jedi, or lost by them. That is what I need to determine who truly controls this war. Because it isn't your council, and I suspect it isn't your Senate either. Anakin felt a chill run down his spine. Then who? Guilliman's expression was grim. That is the question that will determine whether I fight for you or against the corruption I can already smell beneath your Republic's rotting foundation. He strode from the chamber, leaving Anakin standing alone in the fading light, feeling for the first time that the Clone Wars were far more terrible than he'd ever imagined. And somewhere in the temple's depths, a shadow smiled, pleased with the chaos and uncertainty this new variable would create. After all, Darth Sidious thought, even unexpected pieces could be played if one knew the game well enough. The Venator-class Star Destroyer Resolute carried a crew of 7,000 clones. Guilliman requested to inspect them all. Captain Rex led the Primarch through the ship's barracks levels, past training rooms where troopers drilled in close-quarters combat, through mess halls where identical faces ate identical rations in identical uniforms. With each corridor, each chamber, each formation of perfectly synchronized soldiers, Guilliman's expression grew harder. Rex had been a soldier his entire life, all 10 years of it. He'd served under Jedi generals, fought impossible battles, led men to their deaths, and lived with the weight of command. He thought he understood war. But walking beside this towering warrior from another reality, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Shame. "Tell me about your training," Guilliman said, as they entered a simulation bay where a squad of shinies fresh from Kamino practiced combat maneuvers. From decanting to deployment. "Everything," Rex recited it by rote. "We're flash-trained from emergence, combat protocols, weapons handling, tactical doctrine, all imprinted during accelerated maturation. By age 10, we're the equivalent of a 20-year-old human with a decade of combat experience." "Impossible," Guilliman stated flatly. "Muscle memory requires repetition. Neural pathways need time to solidify. You can imprint knowledge, but not instinct, not experience. The Kaminoans lied to you, or to whoever commissioned your creation." Guilliman stopped, watching the shinies move through their drill. His enhanced perception cataloged everything: reaction times, formation spacing, weapon discipline. "These soldiers are adequate, well-trained by conventional standards. But you..." He turned to Rex. "You move differently, think differently. Why?" Rex hesitated. "Experience, sir. I've been in combat since Geonosis. Lost brothers, made mistakes, learned. So the flash training is a foundation, not a replacement for genuine experience." Guilliman's eyes narrowed, which means every fresh battalion deployed is tactically inferior to veterans, yet they're thrown into combat at the same rate, suffering predictably higher casualties, which necessitates more clones, which perpetuates the cycle. His jaw tightened, deliberately inefficient, strategically wasteful. Unless what? "Sir, unless someone wants you to die," Guilliman said quietly. "Wants you to remain dependent, replaceable, expendable. Wants your numbers never quite sufficient, your losses never quite sustainable, keeping the Republic always desperate enough to accept whatever measures become necessary." Rex felt something cold settle in his stomach. "We're soldiers, sir. Casualties are part of..." "Do not recite doctrine to me, Captain." Guilliman's voice cut like a vibroblade. "I have built armies, trained legions, led billions. I know every rationalization, every justification, every comfortable lie commanders tell themselves to sleep at night." He stepped closer, and Rex had to crane his neck to meet those ancient, terrible eyes. "But answer me this. When the war ends, what happens to you?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. I serve the Republic, sir. That's what I was made for." "Made," Guilliman repeated, and the word carried such weight that Rex actually took a step back. "You keep using that word. Made. Not born, not raised. Made. Like a weapon, a tool, a resource to be expended. We're proud to serve. Pride in chains is still chains." The sudden fury in Guilliman's voice made every trooper in the simulation bay freeze. "You speak of service as if you chose it, as if you had any choice at all. But tell me, Captain Rex, were you ever offered another path? Were any of your brothers told they could be farmers, merchants, scholars, fathers, or were you grown in a vat, indoctrinated from consciousness, and pointed at an enemy before you were old enough to question what you were?" Rex's hands clenched into fists. We're soldiers. Good soldiers. We've saved countless lives. At the cost of your own. Guilliman's voice echoed through the bay. You've been engineered for accelerated aging. You'll be dead of old age by 40 if you survive combat that long. Your entire existence compressed into 2 decades of warfare. And you call this service? It's purpose, Rex shot back, anger finally breaking through military discipline. We have a purpose. We matter. We're not just what? Guilliman's voice went dangerously soft. Just slaves? Just property? Just acceptable losses in someone else's war? The word slave hit Rex like a physical blow. They'd never. It wasn't, except it was. The truth of it crashed over him with terrible clarity. They were property of the Republic, owned, bred for a single purpose, denied citizenship, denied choice, denied any existence beyond war, and they'd been conditioned so thoroughly, so completely, that they'd never even questioned it. I have brothers, Guilliman said, his voice rough with old pain. 18 of them, once. Warriors like me, created by our father to lead his armies in a galaxy-spanning crusade. We were weapons too, Captain. Designed, engineered, raised with a single purpose. His eyes went distant. Some of us rebelled against that purpose, tore the Imperium apart in civil war that lasted years. Others served loyally and were destroyed for it. A few of us lived long enough to see the cost of our father's design. He looked back at Rex, and in those eyes, the clone captain saw something unexpected. Understanding. I know what it is to be made rather than born, Guilliman continued. To have your purpose decided before you draw breath. To be told that your existence serves a greater good, and that questioning it is betrayal. His hand clenched into a fist, but I also learned, through blood and failure and the ashes of civilizations, that being created for a purpose does not obligate you to that purpose. You are not tools. You are men, and men deserve to choose their own fate. Sir, one of the shiny troopers spoke up, his voice uncertain. Are you saying we shouldn't fight? Guilliman turned to address the entire bay, his voice carrying to every corner. I'm saying you should fight for yourselves, not because genetics dictate it, not because some Kaminoan breeder decided your purpose, but because you choose to defend something worth defending. He paused. And when this war ends, if you survive it, you should have the right to walk away, to build lives, to be more than the weapon someone else forged. The simulation bay was absolutely silent. 100 clone troopers stared at the armored giant who had just spoken heresy against everything they'd been taught to believe, and in that silence, something shifted. A crack in the foundation of their conditioning. Small, barely perceptible, but there, Rex felt it too. A possibility he'd never allowed himself to imagine. What if they were more than soldiers? What if they deserved more than death in battle or accelerated old age in some forgotten facility? What if they were free? Captain, Guilliman said, his tone returning to military formality. I need complete access to your clone creation facilities on Kamino. Medical data, genetic specifications, training protocols, everything. And I need to speak with the Kaminoans directly. Sir, that would require authorization from the Jedi Council and the Senate Military Oversight Committee. Then I will obtain it. Guilliman moved toward the bay exit, then paused. One more question, Captain. In your entire life, have you ever met the man whose genetic template created you, this Jango Fett? No, sir. He died on Geonosis before you could ask him if he consented to having his genes replicated 3 million times. Guilliman's expression darkened. Another convenient death. Another unanswered question. He turned back to the assembled clones. You are soldiers. I can see that. Good ones. But never forget you are also men, and that makes you worth more than any war. He left the bay, his armored footsteps echoing in the silence. Rex stood motionless, his mind reeling. Around him, his brothers whispered among themselves, some angry, some confused, many simply stunned. The Primarch's words had carved through their conditioning like acid through armor plate, exposing truths they'd never been allowed to contemplate. "Sir?" One of the shinies approached Rex cautiously. "Is he right? About us being?" "About what we are." Rex looked at the young trooper, barely 10 years decanted, flash-trained, already preparing to die for a republic that owned him, and felt something break inside his chest. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I think we need to find out." In the ship's command center, Anakin watched the security footage from the simulation bay with growing unease. Ahsoka stood beside him, her expression troubled. "Master, he's undermining our entire military structure," she said. "The clones need unity, discipline. If they start questioning their purpose..." "Maybe they should," Anakin interrupted, surprising himself with the words. But once spoken, he couldn't take them back, didn't want to. "I grew up a slave, Ahsoka, on Tatooine. I know what it's like to be owned, to be property." His hands clenched. "When I look at the clones, sometimes I see myself, and I hate it. But they're not slaves. They're soldiers who were bred without consent, trained without choice, and will be discarded when they're no longer useful." Anakin's voice was harsh. "What do you call that?" Ahsoka had no answer. On the bridge, Admiral Yularen reviewed Guilliman's tactical recommendations from the Christophsis engagement. The Primarch had submitted a 40-page analysis within 3 hours of the battle, 40 pages of brutal, precise criticism that tore apart every assumption the Republic Navy operated under. And the terrifying thing was, it was all correct. "Admiral?" His tactical officer approached nervously. "We've received new orders from Republic Command. They want us to escort the Lord Commander to Kamino, under Jedi supervision." Yularen nodded slowly. "Of course they do. They want to control what he sees, what he learns." He stared at the tactical display, showing clone deployment across the galaxy, millions of identical soldiers, fighting and dying in a war that seemed to have no end. "Officer, do you ever wonder what happens to the clones when the war ends?" The tactical officer blinked. "Sir? Sir?" "Nothing," Yularen said quietly. "Prepare the ship for hyperspace, and send a priority message to Kamino. Tell them Lord Commander Guilliman is coming, and that he has questions." In the depths of the ship, in quarters hastily prepared for their massive guest, Guilliman stood before a viewport displaying the infinite stars. His armor's systems were running constant analysis of everything he'd observed: battle data, political structures, genetic profiles, tactical patterns. The picture emerging was damning. This republic was already dead. It simply hadn't stopped moving yet. The corruption ran too deep, the manipulation too thorough. Someone these Sith the Jedi mentioned, or perhaps something worse, had orchestrated a war specifically designed to destroy the very thing it claimed to defend. And the clones. The clones were the key. Slave soldiers with loyalty coded into their genes, engineered to obey without question, disposable and replaceable. The perfect army for a transition from Republic to Empire. All someone would need to do is give the order, and 3 million weapons would turn on their Jedi masters simultaneously. It was elegant, horrifying, and exactly the kind of plan a being like his father might have conceived. "What have I walked into?" Guilliman murmured to the stars. "What fresh hell has the universe deposited me into?" His armor's communicator chimed Admiral Yularen, informing him of the journey to Kamino. Good. He would see where these clones came from, examine the source of the Republic's greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability. But first, he would compile his observations into a report. Not for the Jedi Council, they were too compromised, too invested in their role as generals. Not for the Senate, they were too blind to see the trap closing around them. No. This report would go to the clones themselves, to Captain Rex and others like him. Warriors who deserved to know the truth about what they were, what they'd been made to do, and what choice, if any, remained to them. Because Guilliman had learned one lesson above all others in his millennia of war. Armies built on lies eventually turn on themselves. And when 3 million clone troopers learned the truth, the galaxy would burn. Kamino was a world of endless rain and cold purpose. The cloning facilities rose from storm-racked oceans like monuments to genetic ambition, vast spires of white plasteel and transparasteel, filled with thousands of gestation chambers where men were grown like crops. Guilliman stood on the landing platform as the Resolute departed, rain hammering against his armor, and felt a familiar revulsion. He had seen this before, on 100 worlds, in a dozen different forms. The industrial production of soldiers, the reduction of humanity to raw material. His father had done the same thing, created the Primarchs. The Space Marines, millions of gene-enhanced warriors bred for conquest, the Imperium's greatest strength and its deepest shame. And now, here, in a galaxy that knew nothing of the Emperor of mankind, someone had independently arrived at the same terrible solution. Lord Commander Guilliman, a Kaminoan administrator, glided forward, her elongated neck bending in what might have been a bow. I am Ton We, Senior Cloning Supervisor. We are honored by your visit. Her large eyes blinked with clinical curiosity. Your physiological structure is fascinating. Enhanced genetics, clearly. Military optimization. Are you also a product of genetic engineering? Yes, Guilliman said bluntly. And I know exactly what that costs. The Kaminoan tilted her head, not understanding. Cost? Our clones are priced very competitively. I don't mean credits. Guilliman's voice could have frozen the rain itself. Show me your facilities, all of them, and explain to me how you justify creating sentient beings without their consent. Town. We blinked again, genuinely confused. They are products. Commissioned by the Republic. Their consent is irrelevant? Captain Rex, who had accompanied Guilliman to Kamino, felt something inside him go very still. Irrelevant. His consent, his brother's consent, was irrelevant. They weren't people to the Kaminoans. They were merchandise. Guilliman's hand moved to the Emperor's sword at his hip, and for a moment, Rex thought the Primarch might actually draw it, but instead, he simply nodded. Show me. The tour was methodical and damning. Ton. We led them through gestation chambers, where thousands of embryos floated in amniotic suspension, their accelerated growth monitored by cold machines and colder scientists, past training facilities where children, because that's what they were, children drilled with live weapons, through psychological conditioning rooms where flash training imprinted loyalty so deep it became indistinguishable from instinct. We've refined our techniques since the original order. Tom, we explained with evident pride. Behavioral modification is now integrated at the genetic level. Obedience, discipline, reduced independent thought in favor of enhanced tactical cooperation. The Jedi specifically requested modifications to ensure absolute loyalty. Guilliman stopped walking. The Jedi requested that? Of course. We cannot have soldiers who question orders during combat. The behavioral inhibitors ensure. Behavioral inhibitors. Guilliman's voice had gone quiet, dangerously quiet. You're describing neural control mechanisms, genetic programming that overrides free will. Not overrides, Town, we corrected. Eliminates the conflict between individual desire and military necessity. Much more efficient. Rex felt sick. He'd known about the inhibitor chips all clones did. They were told it was to prevent aggressive tendencies, to smooth out the more violent aspects of Jango Fett's personality. But hearing it described as eliminating free will, where? Guilliman said, each word precisely enunciated. Are these inhibitor chips located? Cerebral cortex, near the limbic system. We can show you the... You will show me everything. Guilliman turned to face the Kaminoan fully, his massive frame towering over her. Specifications, implementation procedures, override protocols, and you will explain to me, in detail, what these chips can be programmed to do. Something in his tone must have penetrated even Tonwi's clinical detachment. She hesitated. The specifications are classified, Republic military. I am not asking. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop. Ton. We looked to Captain Rex, perhaps expecting support. Rex simply stared at her with an expression she'd never seen on a clone's face before. Hatred. Follow me, she said quietly. The technical specifications were worse than Guilliman had imagined. The inhibitor chips weren't just behavioral modifiers. They were complete neural override systems, capable of broadcasting programmed responses directly into a clone's motor cortex. With the right frequency and encryption code, someone could make 3 million clones execute any command simultaneously. Any command at all. These aren't soldiers, Guilliman said, staring at the technical readout. These are biological droids with the illusion of autonomy, remote-controlled weapons that think they're making choices. The clones retain significant independent function. Ton, we protested. The chips only activate under specific circumstances. What circumstances? That information is classified at the highest levels of Republic. Guilliman's fist slammed into the console, crumpling the durasteel like paper. What? Circumstances. Tonwi's composure finally cracked. Protocol orders, contingency commands. We were given a list of scenarios that might require immediate, absolute response. Treason, betrayal, threats to Republic security that require... She stopped, realizing she'd said too much. Require what? Rex stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Require us to kill our generals, our friends, people we've served with for years? The Kaminoan's silence was confirmation enough. Rex felt his entire world tilt. Every battle, every moment of camaraderie with his Jedi, every decision he'd thought was his own. And all along, there was a switch in his head that could override everything, turn him into a weapon aimed at the people he cared about. Get them out. Guilliman's words cut through Rex's spiral. The Primarch was accessing the facility's computer systems, his armor's interface bypassing Kaminoan security like it didn't exist. Schematics flooded the screens, surgical procedures, neural mapping, extraction protocols. The chips, Guilliman continued, his fingers moving with inhuman speed across alien interfaces. They can be removed. Delicate surgery, but possible. I'm downloading everything: specifications, locations, surgical procedures, override codes. He turned to Rex. How many clones do you trust absolutely? Veterans who've proven themselves beyond conditioning. Rex's mind raced. My squad, Fives, Echo, Hardcase, Cody's 212th, Wolf's Pack, maybe 1,000 troopers across the entire Grand Army. Brothers who've been through enough that they think for themselves. That's enough to start. Guilliman's eyes blazed with purpose. We're going to remove those chips. Quietly. Carefully. Create a core of free soldiers who can think without genetic chains. And then... This is highly irregular, Tonwi protested. The chips are integral to clone function. Removing them could cause psychological damage, increased aggression, tactical inefficiency. The chips, Guilliman said coldly, are slave collars. And I have spent my entire existence learning to break chains, even when they're wrapped in justifications and necessity. He looked at Rex. Captain, do you consent to having that device removed from your brain? It was such a simple question. Do you consent? Not, will you follow orders, or is this optimal, or what serves the Republic? Just, do you choose this? Rex had never been asked that before, never been given a choice that was actually his. Yes, he said, and the word felt like freedom. Yes, sir, I do. Over the following days, Guilliman transformed a section of Kamino into something the facility had never seen, a liberation camp. Using the Kaminoans' own equipment and their terrified cooperation, he began the delicate process of removing inhibitor chips. The surgery required precision down to the micron, navigating neural pathways without damaging cognitive function. It should have taken teams of specialists weeks to perform even a single extraction. Guilliman, with centuries of experience in biological modification and an intellect that processed tactical data faster than most computers, performed 12 surgeries the first day, 20 the second. By the third, he trained a cadre of the most skilled clone medics to assist, and the operations increased exponentially. Captain Rex was first. He lay on the surgical table, fully conscious. Guilliman insisted on it, said the clone deserved to be aware for his own emancipation, and felt the delicate probes enter his skull. There was no pain, just pressure, and then clarity. He hadn't realized the chip was affecting him until it was gone. It was like a constant background noise he'd learned to ignore suddenly vanished. His thoughts felt sharper, more his own. And when he thought about the Jedi, about orders, about the Republic, he could question, could disagree, could choose. How do you feel? Guilliman asked, sealing the surgical site with advanced tissue regeneration that left barely a scar. Rex sat up slowly, his hand moving to the back of his head. Like I'm awake for the first time. Sir, the others. We need to, carefully, Guilliman cautioned. We can't free everyone, not yet. The moment whoever designed this system realizes we're removing chips, they'll accelerate their timeline. We need strategic positioning first, key personnel, unit commanders, soldiers positioned near vital systems and leadership. He pulled up a holographic display of the Grand Army's deployment. I'm developing new protocols, training doctrines based on techniques from my own legion. Your brothers are good soldiers. I'm going to make them exceptional ones. But more importantly, I'm going to teach them to think independently, to question orders that don't make tactical sense, to value their own lives and each other's. The Jedi won't approve, Rex said quietly. This kind of independence, questioning orders, it goes against military discipline. Military discipline and blind obedience are not the same thing, Guilliman countered. A disciplined soldier executes orders efficiently. A thinking soldier executes them effectively. I've commanded legions of enhanced warriors for centuries, Captain. I know the difference between an army and a weapon. Your Jedi have been treating you as the latter. I intend to transform you into the former. Over the following weeks, something unprecedented occurred within the Grand Army of the Republic. Guilliman instituted what he called the Astartes Protocols, training regimens borrowed from his Space Marine legions, adapted for baseline humans, enhanced tactical doctrine, small unit independence, adaptive strategy that encouraged initiative rather than rote execution, and most radical of all, ethical training that taught clones they had value beyond their combat effectiveness. Captain Rex's unit became the test bed. They learned to fight not as identical replaceable parts, but as individual warriors with unique skills coordinated toward common goals. Guilliman identified each clone's strengths, Rex's leadership, Fives' technical aptitude, Hardcase's aggressive shock tactics, and refined them rather than homogenizing them. The results were immediate and undeniable. In simulations, Rex's newly trained squad outperformed standard clone units by 40%. In live combat exercises against droid forces, the margin increased to 60. Word spread through the clone ranks like wildfire. Brothers whispered about the giant warrior who treated them like men, who removed the devices from their heads and taught them they could be more than weapons. And soldiers who'd never considered they had a choice began asking questions. On Coruscant, the Jedi Council received reports of Guilliman's activities with growing alarm. "He's undermining the chain of command," Ki-Adi-Mundi protested, "teaching clones to question orders, removing neural safeguards. This is dangerous." "Safeguards," Obi-Wan repeated slowly, his expression troubled. "Master, we never installed safeguards. The Kaminoans told us the chips prevented aggressive tendencies. A chip that can override a clone's free will," Mace Windu interrupted, having reviewed Guilliman's full report, "is not a safeguard. It's a weapon, pointed at us." The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. "Discovered this, the Primarch has," Yoda said softly. "Question we must, who controls the trigger, and what orders might those chips execute?" Before anyone could respond, Chancellor Palpatine's hologram materialized in the chamber, his expression grave. "Masters, I've received disturbing reports from Kamino. This Lord Commander is conducting unauthorized modifications to our clone forces, removing critical behavioral systems. We cannot allow what, Chancellor?" Mace's voice was sharp. "Cannot allow our soldiers to have free will. Cannot allow them to think for themselves." Palpatine's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "I cannot allow the integrity of our military to be compromised during wartime by an unknown entity from another dimension. Whatever his intentions, Guilliman is introducing variables we cannot control. Perhaps," Obi-Wan said carefully, "we've been controlling too much already." In the shadows of his office, after the hologram faded, Palpatine's expression shifted. The concerned Chancellor vanished, replaced by something ancient and malevolent. Darth Sidious had spent decades engineering this moment. Order 66. The contingency order that would turn 3 million clones against their Jedi commanders in a single, devastating purge. The inhibitor chips were the key to everything, the trigger that would transform the Republic's defenders into the Empire's executioners. And now this Primarch threatened to remove them. "Lord Tyrannus," he spoke into a secure channel. Count Dooku's hologram materialized. "Execute Protocol Amber. Guilliman has become a threat to our plans. A direct assault on Kamino would. Not an assault, an opportunity." Sidious's smile was cold. "The Primarch has gathered the most independent-thinking clones in one location, their commanders, their veterans, the very clones most likely to resist. Order 66. His eyes glittered. "Destroy Kamino. Destroy them all, and destroy Guilliman with them. Let the Republic see what happens when someone questions our necessary methods." Dooku bowed. "It shall be done, my master." The hologram faded, leaving Sidious alone with his dark satisfaction. The Primarch thought he could save the clones, thought he could disrupt carefully laid plans, but he didn't understand this galaxy, didn't understand the depths of Sith manipulation. He would learn, in failure, in fire, in the deaths of the very soldiers he sought to free, and then, perhaps, he might be broken enough to serve a true empire. On Kamino, unaware of the approaching storm, Guilliman stood before 200 freed clones brothers whose chips had been removed, who could think clearly for the first time in their lives. Captain Rex stood beside him, and behind them both, the endless rain hammered against the facility's walls. "You are no longer slaves," Guilliman told them, his voice carrying over the storm. "You are soldiers, free soldiers, and when the time comes when whoever designed those chips activates them, you will be the ones who stand between your brothers and their chains." He raised the Emperor's sword, its impossible light reflecting in 200 pairs of eyes that saw their future clearly for the first time. "We are going to save your brothers, all of them, and then we are going to find whoever tried to enslave you." His voice went cold with promise. "And we are going to make them pay." The Separatist fleet emerged from hyperspace like a hammer falling on an anvil. 30 capital ships, twice that in frigates and carriers, enough droid fighters to blot out Kamino's storm-racked sky. At the fleet's center, Count Dooku's personal command ship, a Providence-class destroyer bristling with weapons and dark purpose. Guilliman stood on Kamino's orbital defense platform, watching the enemy fleet deploy with the analytical precision of someone who'd orchestrated 1,000 such assaults. His armor's sensors fed him tactical data faster than the Kaminoan systems could process it. "Textbook planetary assault formation," he observed, his voice cutting through the alarm klaxons. Heavy ships establishing orbital superiority, fighter screens preparing for atmospheric penetration, ground forces staged for immediate deployment. His eyes narrowed. Someone with actual military competence planned this. "They're targeting the cloning facilities," Admiral Yularen reported from the defending Republic fleet, 3 Venators and a handful of support ships. Hopelessly outnumbered. "Sir, we need to evacuate. We can't hold against those numbers." "No," Guilliman said flatly. "You can't, but I can buy you time." Before Yularen could protest, the Primarch activated his armor's thrusters and launched himself directly at the Separatist fleet, alone. On his flagship's bridge, Count Dooku watched the golden figure accelerate toward his armada with something approaching disbelief. Is that warrior seriously attacking an entire fleet by himself? "Sensors confirm single humanoid target," his tactical droid reported. "Trajectory indicates collision course with forward screen. Recommend concentrated fire. All ships," Dooku commanded, his cultured voice carrying absolute authority. "Weapons free. Destroy him." The void erupted in emerald fire. Turbo lasers carved burning lines through space. Point defense cannons created a wall of death. Proton torpedoes streaked toward the lone figure with targeting locks that shouldn't miss. Enough firepower to level a city block focused on a single target. Guilliman's armor blazed with impacts, energy shields flaring as they redistributed force according to physics this galaxy had never mastered. He twisted mid-flight, servos screaming, using his own momentum and the Emperor's sword to deflect shots that would have vaporized him. A proton torpedo detonated close enough to cook an unprotected human. Guilliman flew through the fireball and emerged unscathed. "Impossible," Dooku breathed, feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades. Not fear, precisely, but recognition. He was watching something that shouldn't exist, a warrior operating on principles beyond the Force itself. Guilliman reached the first capital ship, a recusant-class destroyer, and didn't slow down. He crashed through its bridge viewport in an explosion of shattering transparent steel and decompression, his armored bulk smashing through the command deck like a meteor. Battle droids turned to engage. He killed 12 with his hands alone, before drawing the Emperor's sword. Then the killing became art. The blade moved faster than optical sensors could track, each strike severing multiple targets. Droids exploded, their cores ruptured by energies that rejected their very existence. Guilliman moved through the ship's corridors with the efficiency of a surgeon and the brutality of an avalanche, carving toward the reactor core with mathematical precision. "Bridge to reactor control," the ship's central computer announced calmly. "Hostile boarding action detected. Recommend." Guilliman's fist punched through the reactor shielding. The destroyer's power core went critical in seconds. Guilliman was already moving, bursting through the hull as the ship began its death spiral, using the explosion's shockwave to propel himself toward the next target. On Dooku's command ship, the Sith Lord watched the tactical display in growing fascination, one destroyer down. The Primarch was already breaching a second, fighting an entire fleet single-handedly, not through impossible force powers, but through sheer tactical genius and physical superiority. "This is remarkable," Dooku murmured. "General Grievous, are you observing this?" The cyborg general's hologram flickered into view, his mechanical breathing harsh with what might have been excitement. I am. That warrior. He fights like me. No force sensitivity. Pure physical superiority and tactical perfection. I must face him. Then you shall have your wish, Dooku said. Prepare your personal forces. I'll engage the defense fleet. You hunt the Primarch. Grievous's vocabulator crackled with something approaching joy. Finally, a worthy addition to my collection. Below, on Kamino's surface, Captain Rex coordinated the evacuation with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. Freed clones moved with enhanced purpose, Guilliman's training showing in their synchronized precision. But there were still thousands of their brothers trapped in the facility, brothers with chips still active, brothers who didn't know they were slaves. Sir, Fives approached, his expression grim. The Separatists are going to destroy this facility. All those clones still in gestation. 17 Hare, has consider, once for 17. I know, Rex said, feeling the weight of it. But we can't save them all. We save who we can, and trust that Lord Commander knows what he's doing. Above the planet, Guilliman had destroyed his third capital ship and was assessing the tactical situation with cold pragmatism. The Separatist fleet was repositioning, learning from his attacks, establishing overlapping fields of fire that even he couldn't penetrate directly. Good, they were adapting. That meant they had competent leadership, which meant he could hurt them by removing that leadership. His armor's sensors locked onto the Providence-class destroyer at the fleet's center, larger than the others, better shielded, emanating a power signature that suggested unusual capabilities. The command ship. Someone important was there. Guilliman adjusted his trajectory, ignoring 3 lesser targets to aim for the heart of the enemy formation. Count Dooku felt the Primarch's approach like pressure building before a storm. Through the Force, he sensed. Nothing. Not darkness. Not light. Not even the void that certain creatures created. Just absence, as if the warrior existed in a space where the Force had no meaning. Intriguing and terrifying. My lord, his tactical officer reported. The hostile is on collision course with our position. The droid stopped, processors struggling with the data. He's accelerating. His velocity is increasing beyond any propulsion system we can identify. Of course it is, Dooku said, igniting his lightsaber. Seal the bridge, activate all internal defenses, and inform General Grievous his prey is coming to him. Guilliman hit the Providence-class destroyer like an orbital strike. His armored bulk punched through the heavy cruiser's hull, tearing a wound 20 meters wide. Atmosphere screamed into vacuum. Battle droids deployed in waves, B-1s, B-2s, destroyers, even the experimental BX-series commandos. Guilliman carved through them with contemptuous efficiency, barely breaking stride. Then the blast doors ahead exploded outward, and General Grievous emerged. The cyborg general stood nearly as tall as Guilliman, his skeletal frame wrapped in armor plating, 4 arms spreading wide as each hand gripped a lightsaber. Blue and green blades ignited, stolen from dead Jedi, held by a killer who'd perfected the art of murder through sheer mechanical precision. Finally, Grievous hissed, his vocabulator crackling. He attacked with the speed of a combat droid and the lethality of a Sith, all 4 lightsabers becoming a whirling cage of plasma death. It was an assault that had killed dozens of Jedi Knights, overwhelming force delivered with mathematical perfection. Guilliman met it with the Emperor's sword. The first clash sent shockwaves through the corridor, metal shrieking as impossible energies met. Grievous's optical sensors widened. The Primarch's blade shouldn't have been able to parry lightsabers, nothing physical could, but somehow it did. More than that, it dominated them, turning each strike aside with force that made Grievous's servos scream in protest. "What are you?" Grievous demanded, pressing the attack with all four arms, spinning and slashing in patterns designed to overwhelm organic reaction times. "I am Roboute Guilliman," the Primarch replied, his voice eerily calm as he fought. "And you are a pale imitation of true warriors I've destroyed by the thousands." He proved it. The hand of Dominion caught one of Grievous's lightsabers mid-swing, the Power Fist's energy field containing the plasma blade for a split second long enough for Guilliman to wrench the weapon free and crush it. 3 arms left. Guilliman's combat programming, centuries of warfare distilled into pure instinct, analyzed Grievous's fighting style in real time. Predictable, based on overwhelming speed and numerical advantage. No adaptation, no creativity, just programming. Guilliman shifted tactics, abandoning defense entirely. He took a lightsaber strike to his shoulder pauldron. The blade scored the ceramite, but didn't penetrate, and used the opening to drive his fist into Grievous's chest plate. The impact crumpled armor, drove the cyborg back 3 meters. "You're a machine pretending to be a warrior," Guilliman said, pressing forward. "I've fought actual warriors. You don't qualify." Grievous roared and attacked with desperate fury. 2 lightsabers spun in defensive patterns, while the 3rd arm reached for a blaster, firing point blank. Guilliman took the shots on his armor, closed the distance, and drove the Emperor's sword through Grievous's lower left arm. The blade's energies, whatever they were, severed the cybernetic limb cleanly. 2 arms left. "Retreat," Grievous commanded, suddenly tactical rather than aggressive. "All units, converge on my..." He stopped. Behind Guilliman, the blast doors had opened. Count Dooku stood there, lightsaber ignited, the red blade casting bloody shadows across his aristocratic features. "General Grievous," Dooku said softly, "you are relieved. This one is beyond your capabilities." Grievous hesitated, mechanical pride warring with survival instinct. Finally, he scuttled back, damaged body retreating deeper into the ship. Guilliman turned to face the Sith Lord, and for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, he felt something like recognition. This wasn't a warrior, not truly. This was something else, a manipulator. A poison wrapped in civility. He'd known beings like this in his own galaxy, Horus, Lorgar, brothers who turned beautiful words into weapons sharper than any blade. "Lord Commander Guilliman," Dooku began, his voice cultured and reasonable. "I believe we are fighting on the wrong sides." "There are no sides," Guilliman replied. "Only manipulations. You're a puppet, and you don't even know it." Dooku's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You presume much for someone newly arrived to our conflict." "I presume nothing. I observe." Guilliman deactivated his weapon but didn't lower it. "You're not commanding this war. You're performing in it. Someone else writes the script. Someone who benefits from conflict, not resolution. The Sith are tools, useful idiots who think they're players." Guilliman's voice carried absolute certainty. "I've seen this pattern, Lord Dooku. Seen it play out across a galaxy. Someone orchestrates a war where both sides are controlled, uses it to consolidate power, eliminate opposition, transform the political structure from within, and when the transformation is complete..." He paused. "They activate their failsafe, their weapon hidden in plain sight." Dooku's hand tightened on his lightsaber. "You speak in riddles. I speak in strategy, and I know that 3 million clone soldiers with neural override chips are not a military force. They're an execution method." Guilliman's eyes bored into the Sith Lord. "Tell me, Count, when your master activates those chips, when your supposed enemy's own army turns on them, where does that leave you? Still useful, or just another loose end to be eliminated?" The words struck deeper than any blade could have, because in the depths of his mind, Dooku had wondered the same thing. Sidious's plans were layers upon layers, and even after years of service, the Count didn't know all of them. My master is using you, Guilliman finished, just as he's using the Republic, the Jedi, the clones. Everyone is a piece on a board only he can see, and pieces, Count Dooku, are disposable. Dooku's lightsaber came up, not in attack, but in defense. Defense against truth he didn't want to acknowledge. You know nothing of the Sith, nothing of our power. I know tyranny when I see it. Guilliman's voice went cold. I've served tyrants, become one myself in darker moments, and I recognize the pattern you're trapped in. You think you're building a better order, a more efficient galaxy, but all you're doing is greasing the wheels for someone else's empire. And what would you have me do? Dooku demanded, anger finally cracking his composure. The Republic is corrupt, inefficient, dying. The Jedi are blind. Someone must nothing, Guilliman interrupted. You've already chosen your path, made your compromises, accepted necessary evils until evil became necessity. His expression held something like pity. I can't save you, Count Dooku. You're too far gone. But I can warn you, when your usefulness ends, your master will discard you without hesitation, and all your justifications, all your rationalizations will die with you, unmourned, forgotten, replaced. Dooku stared at the Primarch, feeling the weight of those words. And in the silence between them, he felt something he'd thought long buried. Doubt. The ship shuddered. Guilliman's sensors registered new contacts, Republic reinforcements translating from hyperspace. The battle was shifting. Dooku had a choice. Press the attack and risk everything, or retreat and consider what the Primarch had said. He chose retreat, not from fear, from calculation. This conversation is not finished, Dooku said, backing toward the blast doors. No, Guilliman agreed. But it's already begun. And doubt, Count Dooku, is a seed. It grows in darkness, and you're surrounded by shadows you didn't create but serve nonetheless. The blast doors sealed. Moments later, the Separatist fleet began its withdrawal, leaving behind destroyed ships and questions that couldn't be answered with lightsabers. Guilliman stood alone in the ruined corridor, his armor scorched and dented but unbroken. He'd bought the evacuation time, saved thousands of clones, wounded a general and planted uncertainty in a Sith Lord's mind. But he'd also confirmed his worst suspicions. This war was a stage. The actors thought they were fighting for their beliefs, but someone else held the script, and that someone, the puppet master pulling every string, was still hidden, still planning, still winning. Not for long, Guilliman promised the empty corridor. Not for long. He activated his thrusters and returned to Kamino, where Captain Rex waited with 200 freed clones and 10,000 questions about what came next. The Primarch had answers. They weren't going to like them, but they were the truth, and truth, Guilliman had learned across millennia of war, was the only weapon that never failed, even when it destroyed everything you thought you knew. The Galactic Senate Chamber was a monument to democracy, circular tiers ascending toward a domed ceiling, each platform holding representatives from 1,000 worlds. It was designed to inspire, to remind all who entered that the Republic spoke with the voice of its people. Roboute Guilliman stood in the central speaking platform, surrounded by floating pods of senators, and saw only inefficiency. Members of the Senate. Chancellor Palpatine's voice echoed through the vast chamber, amplified and warm. We are honored to welcome Lord Commander Guilliman, who has fought valiantly alongside our forces. He has requested to address this body on matters of military strategy. Polite applause rippled through the chamber, cautious, uncertain. The senators had heard reports of this giant warrior from another dimension, but seeing him in person was different. His presence filled the space like a gravitational anomaly, impossible to ignore, difficult to comprehend. Guilliman stepped forward, and his voice needed no amplification to carry to every corner of the chamber. Senators, representatives, leaders of the Galactic Republic. He paused, letting the weight of his presence settle. I have spent the last 3 weeks analyzing your war, your tactics, your strategies, your industrial capacity, political structures, and military doctrine, and I have reached a conclusion. The chamber went silent. You are losing. Immediate uproar. Senators shouted protests, their repulsor pods lighting up with demands to respond. Palpatine raised a hand, calling for order, his expression carefully concerned. Lord Commander, a Twi'lek senator called out, we have won countless battles, reclaimed dozens of systems. Our clone army is a stopgap measure that cannot achieve strategic victory. Guilliman interrupted. You produce 3 million soldiers against quadrillions of battle droids. The Separatists can replace their losses in days. Your clones require years. You are fighting an attrition war you cannot win. Then what do you suggest? Senator Bail Organa asked, his voice carefully neutral. The Alderaanian had been watching Guilliman with growing concern. This warrior's words carried a certainty that was both compelling and terrifying. Guilliman activated a holographic display, flooding the chamber with tactical data, star charts, force deployments, industrial output comparisons, shipping routes. Every senator could see the brutal mathematics of the conflict laid bare. Total war doctrine, Guilliman stated. Immediate implementation of the following protocols. First, full militarization of Republic industrial capacity. Every shipyard, every factory, every resource extraction facility converted to war production. Second, conscription. Your clone army is insufficient. You need 50 million soldiers, not 3. Draft from every member world. No exemptions. The chamber erupted again. Senators shouted over each other, their voices blending into chaos. Guilliman waited, his expression unchanged, until Palpatine restored order. You're proposing we turn the Republic into a military state, Senator Mothma said, her voice cold. Forced conscription, industrial seizure, that's effective, Guilliman finished. Third protocol. Consolidation of command. Your current military structure is fragmented across regional sectors, each operating semi-independently, inefficient, contradictory. You need unified command under a single strategic authority. I recommend a Grand Admiral position with absolute authority over all military operations. Absolute authority? Organa's expression darkened. That's dictatorship with a military title. That's victory, Guilliman countered. Fourth, elimination of the Separatist civilian population's capacity to resist. Total blockade of Confederate worlds. Starvation protocols. Cut their supply lines, destroy their agricultural infrastructure, and force surrender through attrition. You're describing genocide. Senator Mothma was on her feet now, her voice shaking with outrage. Starving entire planets. I'm describing war. Guilliman's voice cut through her protest like a blade. War as it must be fought to be won. Your current approach, limited engagement, surgical strikes, attempts to minimize civilian casualties, prolongs the conflict indefinitely. Every day this war continues. More die, more suffer. Dragging out conflict in the name of mercy is simply cruelty extended. He manipulated the holo display, showing casualty projections. Your current doctrine will result in approximately 15 billion deaths over a 10-year period. My protocols will cause 8 billion deaths over 18 months. Then peace. Permanent peace. Bought with blood. Yes, but isn't that what all peace costs? The chamber was absolutely silent now. Senators stared at the projections, at the cold mathematics of mass death reduced to strategic calculations. Some looked horrified, others, and this was what terrified Organa, looked thoughtful. Fifth protocol, Guilliman continued, his voice relentless. Elimination of Jedi command authority. Your warrior monks are spiritually and philosophically opposed to total war. They will hesitate. Question: introduce moral considerations that compromise tactical efficiency. Remove them from command positions. Use them as elite troops only. The Jedi have led us through, a senator began. Have led you nowhere, Guilliman interrupted. 3 years of war, thousands of systems contested, no strategic progress, no endgame, just endless battle fought by people who aren't soldiers, trying to win a war they don't understand. His gaze swept the chamber. I am a soldier. I understand war, and I'm telling you, continue as you are, and you will lose. Not quickly, not cleanly. You'll bleed out over decades until the Republic collapses from internal exhaustion and your separatist enemies claim victory by default. Chancellor Palpatine stood, his expression grave. Lord Commander, while we appreciate your frank assessment, what you're proposing would transform the Republic into everything we're fighting against. We would become the very tyranny the separatists accuse us of being. Yes, Guilliman said simply. Until the war is won, then you restore democratic processes, demilitarize, and rebuild. He paused. That is the theory, at least. Theory. Organa caught the inflection. You sound doubtful. For the first time, Guilliman's expression shifted. Something like pain crossed his face. I have witnessed this transformation before. In my own galaxy, my father, the Emperor of mankind, unified humanity through exactly these protocols. Total war, absolute authority, justification through necessity. His voice went quiet, and when the immediate threat passed, the emergency powers never rescinded. The military state never demilitarized. The temporary dictatorship became permanent empire. The chamber was frozen, every senator hanging on his words. My father became a god to his people, worshipped by billions, and in the process, he became the very thing he claimed to fight against, a tyrant who crushed freedom in the name of order. His imperium devoured humanity, transformed us into a machine of conquest that couldn't stop even when there was nothing left to conquer. Guilliman's hands clenched. Half my brothers rebelled. The other half died defending a lie. And I built the administrative systems that kept that machine running for 10,000 years. He turned to face Palpatine directly. So, when I tell you that total war will save your Republic, believe me. When I tell you it will also destroy it, believe that too, because I have lived both sides of that equation. And the cost, he trailed off, ancient sorrow in his eyes. The cost is always higher than you imagine. Senator Mothma found her voice. Then why are you proposing this? If you know it leads to tyranny. Because you asked me how to win, Guilliman said. Not how to preserve your ideals. Not how to remain true to your principles. How to achieve military victory. And this is the answer. This has always been the answer. Total commitment, total sacrifice, total transformation. He gestured to the holo display. You want to keep your democracy? Keep your freedom? Then accept defeat. Surrender to the separatists. Let them have the galaxy. At least you'll die with your principles intact. That's insane, another senator protested. That's honest, Guilliman corrected. You cannot have both victory and virtue. War doesn't permit it. You either fight with everything you have, including your souls, or you lose. There is no middle ground, no compromise, no path where you emerge unchanged. His voice hardened, and anyone who tells you differently is either a fool or a liar. His eyes found Palpatine again, and something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding. I see your dilemma now, Chancellor, Guilliman said softly. You're trapped between survival and damnation. Choose total war, become a tyrant. Choose restraint, watch your republic crumble. Either way, you lose. He paused. Unless, Palpatine prompted, his voice carefully neutral. Unless the choice isn't yours at all. Unless someone else has already decided. Unless this entire war is designed specifically to force you into that transformation. To make tyranny seem not just necessary, but inevitable. Guilliman's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Tell me, Chancellor, who benefits when republics become empires? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Palpatine's expression remained concerned, paternal, slightly confused. Lord Commander, I'm not sure I understand your implication. Don't you? Guilliman stepped closer to the Chancellor's platform, his massive frame towering. You're an intelligent man, politically astute. You've survived decades of Republic bureaucracy, risen to its highest office during its greatest crisis. You understand power better than anyone in this chamber. His eyes bored into Palpatine. So tell me, if you wanted to transform a republic into an empire, how would you do it? The chamber was absolutely silent. Every senator watched the exchange, feeling the tension like static electricity before a storm. Palpatine's smile was sad, almost resigned. I suppose I would create a crisis, something existential, force the Republic to choose between its ideals and survival. Then, when it chose survival as it must, I would ensure the emergency powers granted during crisis never quite rescinded. Layer by layer, justify each expansion of authority until the transformation was complete. All done legally, democratically, with the full consent of those being subjugated. Exactly, Guilliman said quietly. And if you were very clever, you'd ensure both sides of the war served your purpose. The enemy would be real enough to terrify, but controlled enough to lose when you wished. The conflict would last exactly as long as needed to complete the transformation. No longer, no shorter. That's conspiracy theorizing, a senator called out. The Separatists aren't controlled, aren't they? Guilliman turned to address the chamber. Your clone army appeared exactly when needed, commissioned by a dead Jedi, paid for by funds no one can trace. Your enemy deploys droid armies that could overwhelm you with sheer numbers but never quite do. The war escalates and de-escalates in convenient patterns, and throughout it all, power consolidates. Emergency measures become permanent. Authority centralizes. Democratic processes erode. He pulled up another holographic display, this one showing the progression of legislative changes since the war began. The senators stared at it, seeing for the first time the pattern. How each vote, each emergency measure, each necessary compromise had slowly, inexorably, transferred power from the Senate to the Chancellor's office. You're already transforming, Guilliman said. My protocols would simply accelerate what's already happening. The question isn't whether you'll become an empire. The question is whether you'll do it consciously, with eyes open, or let yourselves be manipulated into it while believing you're still free. Bail Organa stood, his voice shaking. Are you accusing the Chancellor? I'm accusing no one, Guilliman interrupted. I'm simply stating observations. Someone designed this war. Someone benefits from its continuation and eventual conclusion. Whether that someone sits in this chamber, pulls strings from separatist space, or operates from shadows deeper than either side can see, that I don't yet know. His gaze swept across every senator. But I know this. You are all dancing to music you didn't compose. And when the song ends, you won't like what you've become. Chancellor Palpatine spread his hands, the picture of reasonable concern. Lord Commander, your insights are that we allow the Separatists to tear apart the Republic? I'm suggesting you stop fighting their war and start fighting your own, Guilliman replied. Identify the puppet master, cut the strings, force both sides to actually negotiate rather than perform this choreographed conflict. He paused, but that would require courage, require accepting you've been manipulated, require admitting that everything you fought for might have been in service to someone else's agenda. And you think we lack that courage? Mothma asked quietly. Guilliman looked at her, really looked. Saw a woman who genuinely cared, who believed in the Republic's ideals, who was watching everything she fought for slowly poison itself, like looking in a mirror 10,000 years old. "No, Senator," he said softly. "I think you have it. The question is whether you'll use it before it's too late, before the transformation is complete, before you wake up one morning and realize the Republic died years ago and you've just been animating its corpse." The chamber erupted into arguments, factions shouting at each other, some demanding Guilliman's immediate arrest, others calling for investigation into his claims. Palpatine called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. "This session is adjourned," the Chancellor declared. "We will reconvene to discuss the Lord Commanders." As the senators began filing out, Palpatine approached Guilliman directly. His expression was concerned, almost fatherly. "Lord Commander, you've made serious accusations, dangerous ones." "I've stated observations," Guilliman corrected. "Whether they're dangerous depends entirely on what truth they reveal. And if your observations are wrong, if you're seeing conspiracies where there are only mistakes, the fog of war, creating patterns that don't actually exist?" Guilliman met Palpatine's eyes, and for a long moment they simply stared at each other. Two strategists, two beings who understood power and its costs, one from a galaxy of gods and monsters, the other. "Perhaps I'm wrong," Guilliman finally said. "I hope I am, because if I'm right, Chancellor, this galaxy is already lost, and everyone in this chamber is simply waiting for someone to tell them what they've become." He turned and walked away, his armored footsteps echoing in the emptying chamber. Palpatine watched him go, his expression never changing. But alone in the silence, a smile touched his lips, small, satisfied. The Primarch was more intelligent than anticipated, had seen through layers of manipulation that had fooled the Jedi for years. But intelligence, Darth Sidious knew, was a double-edged lightsaber. Guilliman saw the trap, understood it, and by explaining it so clearly, had actually made it more effective. Now the Senate would debate, divide, paralyze themselves with doubt and suspicion. Some would push for the very authoritarian measures Guilliman warned against, convinced they were necessary. Others would resist, fracturing the Republic's unity further. Either way, the Sith won. "You are wise, Lord Commander," Sidious murmured to the empty chamber. "But wisdom without power is just watching your own defeat, and you, stranger from another galaxy, have no power here." He smiled, dark satisfaction warming his ancient heart. Yet. The transmission came 3 days after Guilliman's Senate address, encrypted, routed through 17 proxy servers, originating from coordinates that shifted every 3 seconds. When Captain Rex finally decrypted it in the Resolute's secure communications bay, the message contained only a location and a time, and a signature that made his blood run cold. Contingency Order Index. "It's a trap," Ahsoka said immediately. The young Togruta stood beside Guilliman in the ship's war room, studying the decoded message with growing unease. "Someone wants you isolated, away from Republic protection." "Obviously," Guilliman replied, examining the coordinates. "Deep space, outer rim, far from any strategic position. The question is who, and what they hope to accomplish." "Could be the Separatists," Rex suggested. "Count Dooku. He'd want revenge after Kamino. Dooku is a warrior. This is a politician's move." Guilliman's eyes narrowed at the message's signature. "Someone with access to Republic military codes, high-level security clearance." Someone who knows about the clone contingency orders. He looked at Rex. Someone who created them. The implications settled over the room like a shroud. The Chancellor? Ahsoka's voice was barely a whisper. Master, you can't seriously think, I think. Anakin interrupted, his jaw tight. That we need to investigate every possibility. The Lord Commander has shown us patterns we've been ignoring for 3 years. Someone is manipulating this war. We need to know who. Then I'll go alone, Guilliman stated. If it's an ambush, no need to risk Republic assets. With respect, sir, Rex said, his newly freed mind working through tactical possibilities. You're the most valuable tactical asset the Republic has. We can't let you walk into a trap unprotected. Can't let me. Guilliman's tone carried amusement rather than offense. Captain, I appreciate the concern, but I've survived traps set by beings who make your galaxy's conspirators look like children playing games. Whatever awaits me there, I can handle it. Can you handle the truth? A new voice asked. They all turned. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood in the doorway, his expression grave. Behind him, barely visible in the corridor, stood Mace Windu. Masters, Anakin acknowledged, tension in his voice. We weren't expecting. The Council has been monitoring Lord Commander Guilliman's activities, Mace said, stepping into the room. Your Senate address. Your modifications to clone trooper protocols. Your investigations into the contingency orders. His eyes fixed on Guilliman. You're stirring up dangerous questions. Questions that should have been asked years ago, Guilliman replied evenly. But I suppose it's easier to fight an obvious enemy than examine your own complicity. Obi-Wan raised a hand before Mace could respond. We're not here to argue. We're here because we've been investigating as well, quietly. And we found. He hesitated, the weight of what he was about to say visible in his expression. We found irregularities. In the clone army's creation, in the war's financing, in patterns of separatist movements that seem almost choreographed. You're saying we were right to be suspicious, Ahsoka said. We're saying, Mace corrected, that the situation is more complex than simple military conflict. There are layers here, manipulations within manipulations, and whoever sent that message knows you're getting close to something they want to keep hidden, or they want to control what I discover, Guilliman observed. Lead me to a truth that serves their agenda rather than reveal the complete picture, which is why, Obi-Wan said, we're coming with you. Jedi protection, Republic authority. Whatever is waiting at those coordinates, we face it together. Guilliman studied the two Jedi Masters. Obi-Wan's measured wisdom, Mace's tempered power. They reminded him of his brother, Primarch's warriors, who'd learned to think, leaders who'd never forgotten how to fight. Imperfect, yes. Compromised by their service to a dying Republic, certainly. But genuine. Acceptable, he said finally. But understand, if we discover what I suspect we'll discover, your loyalty will be tested. The truth might demand you betray everything you've sworn to protect. We're Jedi, Mace said quietly. We serve the Force, and the Force demands balance, even when balance requires sacrifice. The coordinates led them to a derelict space station pre-Republic era, abandoned for centuries according to official records. But as the Resolute approached, Guilliman's sensors registered recent activity, power signatures, life support, shielding that masked the station from conventional scans. Someone's been using this place, Rex reported from the tactical station. And hiding it well. We only detected it because the Lord Commander's sensors operate on different principles than ours. No ships in the immediate vicinity, Anakin added. But there are docking clamps showing recent use. Someone was here. Might still be. Then we proceed carefully, Obi-Wan said. Small team, Lord Commander, Master Windu, Anakin, and myself. Captain Rex, Hold position here. If we don't return in 2 hours, we're coming in after you," Rex finished. His hand moved unconsciously to the back of his head, where the inhibitor chip used to be. "We've got your back, General." The station's interior was a labyrinth of ancient corridors and modern modifications. Someone had retrofitted sections with current technology, holographic interfaces, advanced computing systems, communication arrays powerful enough to reach across the galaxy, but they'd been careful to maintain the appearance of abandonment from the outside. "A hidden base," Mace observed, his lightsaber ready. "But for whom? Separatists? Too sophisticated," Guilliman said, examining a control panel. His armor's interface bypassed the security with ease. Whoever built this used Republic encryption protocols. This was designed by someone with intimate knowledge of Republic systems, someone who needed a place to coordinate. They moved deeper, following power conduits toward what Guilliman's sensors identified as the station's core. The corridors grew warmer, more recently maintained, and then they found it, a central chamber, circular, dominated by a massive holographic projector. Around it, data terminals displayed files labeled with designations that made Obi-Wan's blood run cold. Contingency Order 4, Jedi Council Arrest. Contingency Order 37, Sector Martial Law. Contingency Order 65, Chancellor Removal. Contingency Order 66, Jedi Extermination. "Merciful Force," Obi-Wan breathed, stepping closer to read the files. These are orders to destroy the Jedi. Comprehensive tactical plans, deployment patterns, optimal timing. It's all here. Order 66, Anakin read, his voice hollow. "In the event of Jedi treason, all clone troopers are to execute their commanders immediately. No trial, no investigation, just..." He couldn't finish. "Execution," Guilliman finished grimly, triggered by the inhibitor chips. 3 million clones simultaneously, turning on the Jedi they've served beside for years. Perfectly coordinated genocide, disguised as military contingency. Mace's hand clenched around his lightsaber hilt. "Who created this? The Kaminoans?" "The Kaminoans implemented it," Guilliman corrected, accessing deeper files. "But they were following specifications. Orders from..." He stopped, reading the authorization codes. "Orders from the Office of the Supreme Chancellor, signed 10 years ago, before the war even began." The words echoed in the chamber like a death sentence. "That's impossible," Obi-Wan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Chancellor wouldn't. Chancellor Valorum was in office then, not Palpatine. Was he?" Guilliman pulled up archived records. "Look at the dates. These orders were drafted 6 months before Valorum's term ended, before the Trade Federation blockade of Naboo, before the crisis that brought Palpatine to power." His eyes tracked through the data with superhuman speed. Someone knew Valorum would fall, knew Palpatine would rise, knew a war would begin that would require clone soldiers who could be turned into assassins at a moment's notice. "You're describing a conspiracy spanning decades," Mace said, but he was already piecing it together. The convenient crises, the perfectly timed emergencies, the way power had consolidated around Palpatine like gravity around a black hole. "I'm describing a plan," Guilliman corrected. "Methodical, patient, executed over years with precision that would make even my most calculating brothers seem impulsive." He accessed another file, and his expression went cold. "And here's the final piece. The trigger mechanism for Order 66. It's not activated by evidence of Jedi treason. It's activated by a single individual. One person who can send the signal that turns 3 million soldiers into executioners." "Who?" Anakin demanded. Guilliman turned the display so they could all see. A single name, a single authorization code. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. The silence was absolute. "No," Obi-Wan said, but the word had no strength. He's the Republic's leader. He's guided us through this entire war. He wouldn't he?" Guilliman's voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. A politician who rose to power on the back of crises, who's been granted emergency powers that never rescinded, who's consolidated authority while everyone was distracted by war, who benefits from both sides of the conflict, continuing exactly long enough to complete a transformation from Republic to Empire. He paused. "Tell me, Master Kenobi, if you were a Sith Lord seeking ultimate power, could you design a better strategy?" "Sith Lord," Mace repeated, and suddenly it all clicked into place. The darkness they'd sensed but couldn't locate. The shroud over the Force. The way Palpatine was always slightly ahead of events, as if he knew what was coming. The Sith Lord we've been searching for, he's been right there, in plain sight, ruling the Republic, while you fought his puppet war, Guilliman confirmed. Count Dooku, General Grievous, the entire separatist movement all controlled, all serving to create the conditions for Palpatine's final transformation. And when the time is right, he'll activate Order 66, eliminate the only force in the galaxy capable of opposing him, then reveal himself as Emperor, with 3 million loyal soldiers and a galaxy too exhausted by war to resist. Anakin's hands were shaking. "We have to stop him, arrest him, bring him before the Senate." "On what evidence?" Obi-Wan asked quietly. "These files? Found in a hidden station we can't prove he controls? The Jedi's word against the Chancellors during wartime?" He shook his head. "We'd look like we're staging a coup. Exactly the kind of Jedi treason that would justify Order 66. He's already won," Mace said, the realization heavy as a gravestone. "Every move we make, he's anticipated. Every response, already planned for. We're trapped. Not trapped," Guilliman corrected. "Outmaneuvered." Outmaneuvered means the options you have all serve your opponent's strategy. His eyes gleamed with tactical calculation. "So we change the game. Stop playing by his rules." "How?" Anakin demanded. "By removing his weapons." Guilliman gestured to the files. "The inhibitor chips are his trigger. We've already freed 200 clones. We expand that, quietly, systematically. Create a core of free soldiers who can resist the Order when it comes. That will take months." Obi-Wan protested. "Years. There are 3 million clones. We don't need all of them. We need the right ones." Guilliman was already calculating. Key positions, strategic locations, clone commanders who control critical systems. If we free enough of the right soldiers, Order 66 fails. Not completely, many will still execute it, but enough will resist to create chaos rather than clean extermination. And in that chaos, Palpatine's plan collapses. "He'll know," Mace said. "The moment we start removing chips on a large scale, he'll notice, and he'll accelerate his timeline." "Good," Guilliman said, surprising them all. "Let him accelerate. Let him panic. Panic breeds mistakes, and I am very good at exploiting mistakes." A slow clapping echoed through the chamber. They spun, weapons igniting, as a figure emerged from the shadows. Not Palpatine, someone else. Wrapped in a dark cloak, face hidden, presence radiating cold menace. "How delightfully predictable," the figure said, voice modulated to mechanical neutrality. "The Primarch finds the evidence. The Jedi experience revelation, and now you'll attempt to save the galaxy through small rebellions and tactical brilliance." A hollow laugh. "You're still playing the game, Lord Commander, just on a slightly different board." "Who are you?" Mace demanded, lightsaber raised. "I am the contingency plan's contingency plan. The backup measure. The variable introduced to ensure the primary strategy remains on track even when complications arise. The figure gestured to Guilliman. You were one such complication. Unexpected, potentially disruptive. So, I was activated by Palpatine, Guilliman stated. By my master, yes, who anticipated your intelligence, your tactical genius, your potential to unravel carefully laid plans. The figure's mechanical voice carried amusement. So he gave you exactly what you wanted, a hidden base, evidence, revelation, all carefully curated, all designed to make you think you discovered the truth. Ice formed in Guilliman's chest. Everything that matters. The figure touched a control panel and new files emerged. Guilliman's enhanced vision scanned them in microseconds, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The contingency orders weren't limited to the clones. There were protocols for the Senate, for planetary governments, for industrial facilities, for the entire Republic infrastructure. Palpatine hadn't just planned to eliminate the Jedi. He'd planned to transform every single aspect of galactic civilization simultaneously. And Order 66 wasn't the trigger. It was the culmination, the final move in a game that was already won. You see it now, the figure said. The chips aren't his only weapon. They're not even his primary weapon. They're theater. A dramatic gesture to cow the survivors. The real transformation is already complete. Has been for months. You're not preventing an empire, Lord Commander. You're standing in one. It simply hasn't announced itself yet. You're lying, Anakin said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Am I? Look at the Senate. Look at how many senators now support authoritarian measures. Look at the military. How many officers would follow Palpatine over the Jedi if forced to choose? Look at the civilian population. How many would accept an emperor if he promised peace? The figure's voice went soft. The Republic is already dead. You're just arguing over the funeral arrangements. Guilliman stared at the data, his mind working through implications at superhuman speed. The figure was right. Palpatine's strategy wasn't centered on the inhibitor chips. That was just insurance. The real victory was ideological, cultural. The slow transformation of a population desperate enough to trade freedom for security. Just like the Imperium, just like his father's conquest, just like every tyranny throughout history. So what now? Obi-Wan asked quietly. If we've already lost, if the Empire is inevitable, then we burn it down, Guilliman said, his voice like iron. If this galaxy is determined to transform itself into tyranny, then I will ensure that tyranny is as short-lived and destructive as possible. I will tear apart Palpatine's carefully built machine, shatter the infrastructure he depends on, turn his own weapons against him, and if I have to reduce this Republic to ashes to prevent it from becoming the Imperium reborn. He turned to face the Jedi Masters, and they saw something in his eyes that made them step back. Not madness, not hatred, just absolute, terrible certainty. Then I will light the match myself. The figure laughed. And there it is. The moment my master predicted. The Primarch embraces destruction, becomes the very thing he sought to prevent. Another tyrant, convinced his tyranny is justified by necessity. I am not. You are exactly that. The figure interrupted. You always have been. A weapon your father forged, a destroyer dressed in administrator's robes. And now, when faced with a trap you can't escape, you default to what you were made to do. The mechanical voice carried something like pity. My master sends his regards, Lord Commander, and his gratitude, because in showing the Jedi the truth, you've broken them, made them doubt themselves, their purpose, their role in the galaxy, and broken Jedi are no threat to anything. The figure vanished, not teleportation, but speed and concealment technologies that left only shadows. In the silence, the four warriors stood among the evidence of their defeat and felt the weight of it settle like a shroud. "He's right," Mace said quietly. "About all of it. We're compromised, broken. Even if we know the truth, we can't act on it without triggering the very disaster we're trying to prevent." "Then we do nothing?" Anakin demanded, anger and frustration warring in his voice. "We do what we can," Obi-Wan said. "Free the clones we can reach. Warn those senators still loyal to the Republic's ideals. Prepare for the worst and hope for anything better." "Hope," Guilliman repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "Hope is not a strategy. Neither is despair," Obi-Wan countered. "You've shown us the darkness, Lord Commander. Now help us find the light." Guilliman looked at the Jedi Master, at his determination despite the odds, his faith despite the betrayal, his commitment despite the cost, and saw something he'd thought lost in his own galaxy. Not naivety, not blindness, just refusal. Refusal to let despair dictate action. Refusal to accept that victory was impossible. Refusal to become the monster that circumstances demanded. "Very well," Guilliman said. "We fight. Not his war, not his game, our own, on our terms. And if we lose with our souls intact," Mace finished. "That's victory enough." They left the station, carrying evidence they couldn't use and knowledge that might destroy them. Behind them, hidden systems activated, transmitted data to distant locations, informed other players that the pieces were in position, and in his office on Coruscant, Darth Sidious smiled, feeling every move slot perfectly into place. The Primarch had found the trap, understood it, and walked into it anyway, because that was what warriors did, what they'd always done, exactly as predicted. The galaxy burned. Not literally, not yet, but the fire was coming. Guilliman could see it in every report, every tactical analysis, every desperate message from clone commanders asking questions they'd never been allowed to ask before. The inhibitor chip removals had accelerated beyond control. Word spread through the Grand Army like a virus, clone talking to clone in hushed voices about freedom and choice, and the devices in their heads that made them slaves. 200 freed clones became 2,000, then 20,000, then more. And with each liberation, Palpatine's carefully constructed machine began to crack. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Outer Rim," Captain Rex said, his voice tight as he stood in the Resolute's war room. Commander Wolf's battalion refused orders to attack a civilian target. Commander Cody's 212th is requesting emergency medical supplies for chip removal. Commander Gree reports 3 of his companies have gone AWOL. They're not deserting, they're just asking why we're fighting. Guilliman nodded, studying the galactic map where red indicators showed clone units in various stages of rebellion. Not against the Republic, against their own conditioning. How many total? Best estimate? 50 to 70,000 clones across the entire Grand Army. Rex's expression was grim. Out of 3 million? Sir, that's barely 2%. If Palpatine activates Order 66 now, most will still execute it, Guilliman finished. I know, Captain, but 2% of 3 million is 60,000 soldiers who won't. 60,000 variables in a plan designed for absolute synchronization. That's enough to create chaos. Chaos might not be enough, Anakin said from across the room. The young Jedi looked older than his years, worn down by weeks of revelation and the weight of knowledge he couldn't share. Palpatine's playing the long game. Every day we free more clones, he gains more political support. The Senate is talking about granting him extended emergency powers, maybe even a permanent executive position. They're doing it willingly, Ahsoka added, her voice carrying bitter understanding. voting for their own subjugation because they think it's necessary, because the war has made them desperate enough to trade freedom for the promise of security. The oldest trap in history, Guilliman said, and the most effective. He manipulated the holographic display, showing political alignments across the Senate. More red than blue now, more authoritarian supporters than democratic holdouts. The Republic is already dead, has been for months. What remains is just bureaucratic momentum and the illusion of choice. Obi-Wan entered the war room, his expression grave. Behind him came Mace Windu and Master Yoda, leaning heavily on his Geimer stick. The ancient Jedi looked diminished somehow, as if the revelations of recent weeks had physically aged him. "News from the Council we bring," Yoda said quietly. "Investigated, we have. Confirmed, your suspicions are the Chancellor. But proof, we lack. Evidence that would convince the Senate. Move against him openly, we cannot. Martyrdom it would create. Exactly what he wants, perhaps. So we're paralyzed," Mace said, frustration evident in his normally controlled voice. "We know the truth, can't act on it, can only watch as he tightens the noose." "Not paralyzed," Guilliman corrected. "Outmaneuvered, yes, but not without options." He pulled up a new tactical display, one he'd been developing in secret for weeks. "I've been analyzing Palpatine's strategy. It's brilliant, I'll grant him that. Multi-layered, redundant, but it has a fundamental weakness." "Which is?" Obi-Wan asked. "It requires him." Guilliman's eyes gleamed with tactical calculation. "The entire plan hinges on Palpatine being the one to unite the galaxy. His political capital, his emergency powers, his authority to command both Republic and eventually Imperial forces. Remove him, and the structure collapses. The Senate fractures, the military splinters, the transformation halts." "You're proposing assassination," Mace said flatly. "I'm proposing elimination of a strategic asset," Guilliman corrected. "There's a difference. Not to a Jedi," Obi-Wan said quietly. "We don't murder politicians, no matter how corrupt. That path leads to darkness, to becoming the very thing we fight against." "Then you've already lost," Guilliman said, his voice hard. "Because your enemy has no such restrictions. Palpatine will kill billions to achieve his goals, has already arranged the deaths of millions, and you're concerned about moral high ground?" He stepped closer to the Jedi Masters, his massive frame intimidating despite or because of his words. "I have walked that high ground, Masters, watched from it as my father's Imperium devoured the galaxy, told myself that because we acted from necessity, we remained righteous, and when I finally looked down from that elevated position, I saw nothing but corpses, an ocean of them, all killed by men who believed they were serving a greater good." "So what's your alternative?" Anakin challenged. "We become killers? Assassins? How does that make us better than Palpatine?" "It doesn't," Guilliman said simply. "It makes us alive. Survival first, morality second. You can philosophize about ethics after you've prevented genocide." Yoda's ears drooped. "Dangerous thinking this is. The dark side. It echoes. Justification through necessity. How many tyrants began there?" "All of them," Guilliman admitted, "including me, including my father, including every leader who ever decided that principles were luxuries they couldn't afford." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 10,000 years. "But here's what I learned, Master Yoda. There's a difference between compromising your principles to achieve a goal and abandoning them entirely. One is strategy, the other is surrender." "A subtle distinction," Obi-Wan observed. "But crucial," Guilliman insisted. "Palpatine must be removed. That's strategic necessity. But how we remove him, that determines whether we're preventing tyranny or simply replacing it with our own." He activated another display, showing a tactical plan so detailed it must have taken weeks to compile. I'm not proposing assassination, I'm proposing exposure. Public revelation of his Sith identity, documentation of Order 66, proof, broadcast across every channel, every system, every corner of the Republic simultaneously. Rex studied the plan, his tactical mind recognizing its elegance. You want to turn the Senate against him, make them see what he really is. More than that, Guilliman said. I want to force him to reveal himself before he's ready. Palpatine's power comes from operating in shadows, pulling strings invisibly. Expose him, drag him into the light, and he has two choices: reveal himself prematurely and fight without full preparation, or deny everything and watch his political capital erode. He'll fight, Mace said with certainty. A cornered Sith Lord won't surrender peacefully. No, Guilliman agreed. He'll attack, probably here, probably soon, which is why we need to be ready to defend, ready to capture him alive if possible, ready to kill him if necessary. His eyes swept across the assembled group. This is the moment, Masters. The fulcrum point. Either we act now, with whatever compromises that requires, or we accept that the Republic falls and hope we survive what rises in its place. The war room was silent. Outside, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, uncaring of the struggles of beings who presumed to rule them. Inside, warriors and monks wrestled with a decision that would damn them regardless of choice. Finally, Yoda spoke. Act, we must, but carefully, mindfully. His eyes met Guilliman's. Your plan, we will implement, but on our terms. The Jedi way. Expose the darkness, yes, but kill, we will not, unless all other paths closed are. That restriction may cost you everything, Guilliman warned. Then everything we will lose, but our souls we will keep. Yoda's voice was firm despite his age. Learn from your Imperium's mistakes, you say you wish to, then help us avoid repeating them. Help us find a path that does not end in tyranny, ours or anyone else's. Guilliman stared at the ancient Jedi Master, seeing in those eyes a wisdom that transcended tactics and strategy, a recognition that some things mattered more than victory, that surviving wasn't the same as living, that becoming monsters to fight monsters was just becoming monsters. Very well, Guilliman said. We do this your way. Exposure first, violence only as last resort. He paused. But when that resort comes, and it will, I need you to be ready. Ready to do what must be done, not what you wish could be done. We will be ready, Mace promised. Though his voice was steady, something in his eyes suggested he knew exactly what that readiness might cost. They had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to coordinate with freed clone commanders, to compile irrefutable evidence, to establish communication networks that Palpatine couldn't shut down, to position forces for the confrontation that was coming. Guilliman worked without sleep, his Primarch physiology requiring only minimal rest. He trained clone units in urban warfare tactics, fortified strategic positions, established contingency plans for 17 different scenarios, each one ending in blood. On the second day, Count Dooku sent a secret transmission, just audio, the Sith Lord's cultured voice carrying an emotion Guilliman hadn't expected. Fear. You were right, Lord Commander, about my master, about my purpose. A pause, heavy with realization. I am to be discarded, replaced by a younger apprentice once the Republic falls. I've seen the plans, the arrangements. My death is already scheduled. Another pause. I don't ask for mercy, don't expect redemption, but I offer information, locations, codes, everything I know about my master's contingencies. In exchange, make it quick. When the end comes, don't let him turn my death into theater. Guilliman stared at the transmission, hearing the exhaustion of a man who'd finally understood the trap he'd built for himself. Why now? Why betray him at all? Because I realized something. Dooku's voice was barely a whisper. I became a Sith to destroy the corruption I saw in the Jedi, to build something better, cleaner, more efficient. But all I built was a machine for creating corpses. And when I looked for meaning in those deaths, for purpose, a hollow laugh. There was nothing, just ambition, just power, just the same, corruption in a different costume. You tried to warn me, at Kamino. I was too proud to listen. You're listening now, Guilliman observed. Too late. But yes, too late. I listen. The transmission crackled. Stop him, Lord Commander. Stop Palpatine. Not for me, not for redemption, but because someone needs to. And you're the only one ruthless enough to do what's necessary, while being principled enough to know when to stop. The transmission ended. 2 days later, Guilliman's network broadcast evidence across the galaxy. Holographic recordings, financial transactions, intercepted communications, documentation of contingency orders. Everything laid bare in a single, devastating information strike. The response was immediate and chaotic. Half the Senate called for Palpatine's arrest. The other half denounced it as Jedi conspiracy. Clone units fractured, some obeying their commanders, others defaulting to deep conditioning. Planetary governments declared states of emergency. And across it all, one voice rose calm, reasonable, sorrowful. Chancellor Palpatine, addressing the Senate in emergency session. My fellow citizens, his voice carried across every channel, every system. I stand before you, not as your chancellor, but as a man falsely accused. The Jedi claim I am a Sith Lord, that I've orchestrated this war, that I plan to destroy democracy itself. He paused, and even through the hologram, Guilliman could see the masterful performance. These accusations are born of desperation. The Jedi Council, realizing they're losing control, seeks a scapegoat, seeks to turn you against your elected leadership. In the Senate chamber, Guilliman stood among the Jedi, watching Palpatine's address. Around them, senators murmured, uncertain, swaying. He's good, Anakin muttered, making us look like the coup plotters, because we are. Guilliman said quietly. From a certain perspective, that's the genius of his position. Any move against him looks like treason. Any accusation sounds like conspiracy theory. He watched Palpatine's face, seeing calculation behind the wounded dignity. He's forcing us to either back down and lose, or press forward and look like villains. Then we press forward, Mace said, and accept the consequences. Palpatine's address continued. I call upon the Jedi Council to surrender themselves for investigation, to allow an independent inquiry into these serious allegations. If they are innocent, as I hope they are, they have nothing to fear. But if they refuse, if they resist the lawful authority of this Senate. His voice hardened, and for just a moment, something ancient and malevolent flickered across his features. Then they revealed themselves as the true traitors to democracy. The trap was closing, beautifully constructed, perfectly executed. He's going to activate Order 66, Rex said, his hand moving to his communicator. I can feel it. This is the justification he needs. Jedi refusing to submit to lawful authority. He'll paint us as traitors. And wait, Yoda interrupted, his eyes distant. Something else, I sense. Something coming. The Senate chamber doors exploded inward. Count Dooku strode through the smoke, his lightsaber ignited, his face a mask of cold determination. Behind him nothing, no droid army, no separatist forces, just one Sith Lord, alone, walking into the heart of Republic power. Chancellor Palpatine. Dooku's voice rang out, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Or should I call you by your true name? Darth Sidious, Master of the Sith, Architect of Genocide. The Senate froze. Palpatine's expression shifted surprise, then calculation, then settling into something that might have been regret. My apprentice, my poor, deluded apprentice. You've been manipulated by the Jedi, made to believe. I believe nothing, Dooku interrupted. I know you plan to replace me with Anakin Skywalker. Know you've arranged my death. Know that everything I've done in your service was in service to your ambition alone. He raised his lightsaber. But I will not die as your pawn. If I must fall, let it be fighting the monster I helped create. He attacked. The fight was brief and brutal. Palpatine moved with speed that shouldn't have been possible for his age, revealing at last what he truly was. Lightning erupted from his fingers, Sith lightning, unmistakable and terrifying, turning the Senate chamber into a storm of dark side energy. Dooku fought with everything he had. Decades of training and power focused into pure assault. He lost. Palpatine's blade, red, crimson, wrong, cut through Dooku's defenses and severed both his hands. The Sith Lord fell to his knees, and Palpatine stood over him, face transformed into something ancient and terrible. Foolish. Palpatine hissed, his voice no longer human. You were always weak, Tyrannus. Too attached to your ideals, too limited by your philosophy. He raised his blade. Let your death serve one final purpose, proving the Jedi's treachery. You attacked me, they put you up to it. And now, Guilliman's bolt pistol spoke first. The shot, a relic weapon from another galaxy, operating on physics this universe barely understood, caught Palpatine in the shoulder, spinning him around. The Chancellor staggered, genuine shock on his face. You dare. I've killed gods, Guilliman said, walking forward, the Emperor's sword igniting in his hand. You're just a politician with parlor tricks. The chamber erupted into chaos. Clone troopers moved to protect the Chancellor, but half of them hesitated, chips removed, free to think. Senators fled or took cover. Jedi ignited their lightsabers, forming a perimeter, and Darth Sidious, revealed at last, smiled. Finally, he breathed. Finally, the masks come off. His wound was already healing, flesh knitting through dark side power. You think you've won, Primarch? Think you've exposed me? Forced me to reveal myself prematurely? His laughter was cold, terrible. I wanted this, needed this. The Jedi attacking me in the Senate. You, an outsider, attempting assassination. It's perfect. He raised his hands, and lightning exploded outward. Not at Guilliman, but at the Senate itself. Senators screamed. Clone troopers fired. Jedi moved to protect civilians. And in the chaos, Sidious's voice rose above everything. Order 66. Execute Order 66. Across the galaxy, inhibitor chips activated. 3 million clones received the signal simultaneously. Most executed it, turned on their Jedi commanders without hesitation, gunned down warriors they'd fought beside for years. The systematic extermination of an entire order carried out by soldiers who hours before would have died to protect them. But 60,000 didn't. 60,000 freed clones heard the order and refused. Some protected their Jedi, others simply stopped, confused, torn between conditioning and liberation. It wasn't enough to stop Order 66, but it was enough to save some. In the Senate chamber, Captain Rex heard the order echo through his communicator and felt nothing. The chip was gone. The compulsion absent. He had a choice. He chose his friends. All freed units, Rex transmitted on encrypted channels. Protect the Jedi. Defend civilians. This is not our order. This is not our choice. We are free. Act like it. The battle for Coruscant began in earnest. Jedi Temple under siege, Senate in flames, clone units fighting each other in the streets. And at the center of it all, in the smoke-filled Senate chamber, Roboute Guilliman fought a Sith Lord with 10,000 years of dark side mastery. Sidious was faster, more experienced with force powers that bent reality, lightning, telekinesis, precognition that let him dodge before attacks came. But Guilliman was a Primarch, bred for war by a being who had unified humanity through conquest, enhanced beyond human limits, trained in combat styles this galaxy had never conceived, and equipped with weapons from a universe where gods walked and daemons screamed. The Emperor's sword met Sith lightning and didn't just deflect it, it consumed it, energies clashing according to contradictory physics. Guilliman moved with precision that made Sidious's speed seem frantic, each strike calculated, efficient, lethal. "You cannot win," Sidious snarled, throwing Senate pods at the Primarch with telekinetic force. "I've planned for centuries, every contingency, every possibility. You're just another variable I've accounted for." "Then you've made a mistake," Guilliman replied, shattering a pod with his fist and continuing his advance. "Because I'm not from your galaxy. Don't follow your rules. Am not bound by your force or your prophecies or your carefully laid plans." He closed the distance, his blade singing. "I am Roboute Guilliman, and I have ended tyrants across 100 worlds." Their weapons met, energies exploded, the floor beneath them cracked, and in that moment, as lightning met impossible metal and dark side corruption touched something forged in a reality where different gods ruled, Sidious felt something he hadn't experienced in a lifetime of conquest: uncertainty. This warrior might actually kill him. The thought was liberating, terrifying, and absolutely unacceptable. The duel shattered what remained of the Senate chamber. Sidious fought with the accumulated fury of 1,000 years of Sith doctrine lightning that could vaporize stone, telekinesis that hurled debris like missiles, speed that made him a blur of crimson and malevolence. But for all his power, all his dark side mastery, he was still bound by the laws of this galaxy, still limited by physics that, however bent by the Force, remained fundamentally times his asterisk. Guilliman wasn't. The Primarch moved through the Sith Lord's attacks like a battleship through a storm, taking damage. Yes, his armor scorched and dented, but never breaking, never slowing. The Emperor's sword carved through force barriers that should have been impenetrable, its impossible energies rejecting the very concept of Sith power. "Your time's nothing, asterisk," Sidious screamed, desperation finally cracking his composure. "A relic, a fragment from a dead universe. You don't belong here." "No," Guilliman agreed, driving forward with mechanical precision. "I don't. But neither does your empire." His blade caught Sidious's lightsaber mid-swing, and for one crystalline moment, they were locked together, ancient Sith and transdimensional warrior, their weapons shrieking where incompatible energies met. "You think killing me stops this?" Sidious hissed, his aged face twisted with rage and something like bitter amusement. "The transformation is complete. The Senate has seen Jedi attack their Chancellor. The clones are executing Order 66 across the galaxy. Even if I die here, my empire rises. The structure is in place, the momentum unstoppable." "You're right," Guilliman said quietly, and pushed. The Emperor's sword sheared through Sidious's lightsaber, cutting the weapon, the focusing crystal, the dark side energy, all of it into sparking fragments. The Primarch's follow-through drove his blade toward Sidious's chest. The Sith Lord vanished in a burst of force speed, reappearing 20 meters away, one hand clutching his wounded shoulder where Guilliman's bolt pistol shot had struck. Blood seeped between his fingers, mortal blood, despite all his power, despite his plans. "You cannot kill an idea," Sidious said, backing toward the Senate's emergency exits. Around them, the chamber burned. Clone troopers fought each other. Jedi desperately held perimeters. Senators cowered or fled. "The Republic is already dead. What rises from its ashes, that's beyond your control now, Primarch. Then I'll burn the ashes too. Guilliman replied, advancing with inexorable purpose. Mace Windu and Obi-Wan reached Guilliman's position, their lightsabers ready. Behind them, Anakin supported a wounded Yoda, the ancient Jedi Master leaning heavily on his student. "Let him go," Yoda said quietly, his voice carrying through the chaos. "Cornered, he is most dangerous. Civilian casualties he will cause. Sacrifice lives to escape. So we just let him run?" Anakin demanded. "After everything, we times choose times our battles," Obi-Wan interrupted, his face grim. "The temple is under siege. Jedi are dying across the galaxy. We need to save who we can, not chase one man." Guilliman stared at the exit where Sidious had retreated, every tactical instinct screaming to pursue, to finish it, to eliminate the threat permanently. But the Jedi were right strategically, if not emotionally. The galaxy was burning. Triage came before vengeance. "Captain Rex," Guilliman activated his comm. "Status?" Rex's voice came back, strained by combat. "We've secured the Senate hangar, evacuating loyalist senators. But sir, the Temple the 501st is executing Order 66, brothers killing Jedi. They've breached the main hall." "Commander Cody?" Guilliman asked, holding the western approach with freed clones. "But sir, we're outnumbered 50 to 1. We can't—" Blaster fire interrupted. "We can't hold much longer." Guilliman turned to the Jedi Masters. "Your temple or your Senate, choose. We don't have resources to save both." The decision hung in the air like a death sentence. Save the younglings, the Jedi artifacts, the heart of their order, or save the politicians, the democratic leadership, the future of whatever government might rise from these ashes. "The younglings," Mace said immediately. "We save the children." "No," Yoda interrupted, his voice heavy with terrible wisdom. "The Senate, we save. Democracy, we preserve. The Jedi," his ears drooped. "Already lost. We are, but the Republic a chance. It still has. Even transformed, even broken, if enough survive who remember what it should be." "Master, we can't just abandon," Anakin started. "Not abandoning, choosing." Yoda met each of their eyes. "Taught us, the Lord Commander has sometimes. No good choices remain, only lesser evils. Save the Senate, we must. Hope that the Force protects those we cannot." The ancient Jedi's shoulders sagged with the weight of it, and for the first time, Guilliman saw him not as a mystical warrior monk, but as an old being forced to watch everything he'd built crumble. "All units," Guilliman transmitted on every channel, the freed clones controlled. "Fall back to Senate District. Establish defensive perimeter. We hold here." "And the temple?" someone asked. Guilliman didn't recognize the voice. "The temple falls," he said flatly, "but we save what we can of what comes after." The Battle of Coruscant raged for 3 days. Clone fought clone in the streets. Freed soldiers defending senators and civilians against their conditioned brothers. Jedi Masters led desperate evacuations, saving younglings when they could, fighting holding actions when they couldn't. And Guilliman transformed the Senate District into a fortress, using Astartes' siege protocols to create a defensible position that even overwhelming numbers couldn't easily breach. Sidious, wounded but alive, broadcast from a secure location. His face, aged and ravaged by dark side corruption, was now visible to the entire galaxy. No more masks, no more pretense. "Citizens of the Republic," his voice carried across every channel, every system. "The Jedi have revealed themselves as traitors, attempted to assassinate your Chancellor, turned clone soldiers against their own brothers. But we will survive this betrayal. We will become stronger. I declare the Republic reorganized into the first galactic empire. On occupied worlds, populations cheered. Planets exhausted by war, desperate for stability, accepted the transformation gladly. The promise of peace, any peace, was worth the cost of freedom. But on other worlds, resistance ignited. Bail Organa broadcast from Alderaan, his voice steady despite the chaos. The Chancellor has revealed himself as a Sith Lord. The evidence is undeniable. We will not accept his empire. Alderaan, Mon Cala, and 20 other systems formally secede. We are the Rebel Alliance. And we will fight. The galaxy fractured, not cleanly into Republic and Separatist, not simply into Empire and Rebellion, but into a dozen factions, each claiming legitimacy, each believing they fought for survival or freedom or order. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible, uncontrolled chaos. Everything Sidious had tried to prevent. On the fourth day, as Imperial forces prepared to assault the Senate District stronghold, Count Dooku's body was found. Not killed in the Senate battle, he'd survived that, barely, and been taken to a medical facility. But someone had reached him there. Someone who couldn't allow loose ends. The official report said he died of his injuries. The unofficial report, whispered by freed clone medics, said he'd been murdered, smothered in his hospital bed by agents wearing Imperial insignia. Guilliman read the report and felt a cold satisfaction. Sidious tying up loose ends, eliminating witnesses who might complicate his narrative. It was what the Primarch would have done, what any competent strategist would do. But it was also a mistake, because Dooku had given Guilliman everything before he died. Access codes, hidden facilities, lists of Sidious's allies, his resources, his contingency plans, information that, properly used, could fuel resistance for decades. He wants to martyr himself, Guilliman told the Jedi Council, assembled in a makeshift headquarters beneath the Senate building. Dooku's murder, the Jedi Purge. He's creating an origin story for his empire, making himself the necessary evil who restored order from chaos. Then we deny him the narrative, Mace said. We survive, resist, prove the Empire isn't inevitable or necessary. We also can't stay here, Obi-Wan added, examining tactical displays. Imperial forces will breach our defenses eventually. We need to evacuate, scatter, establish cells across the galaxy. Guerrilla warfare. Guilliman nodded. Asymmetric resistance. Deny Sidious the decisive battle he wants. Force him to occupy a galaxy that refuses to be held. His eyes gleamed. I've fought campaigns like this before, from both sides. I know how to make an empire bleed, but we are not warriors. Yoda said softly. Peacekeepers. The Jedi were meant to be. Not rebels, not insurgents. Then you'll learn, Guilliman said bluntly. Or you'll die. Those are the options remaining. The evacuation took 2 more days. Ships came from loyalist worlds Alderaan, Mon Cala, a dozen others. They smuggled out senators, Jedi survivors, clone units who'd refused Order 66. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough to plant seeds of resistance across the galaxy. Guilliman coordinated the logistics with ruthless efficiency, prioritizing strategic assets over sentiment. Senators with influence, Jedi with unique abilities, clones with leadership experience. Every person evacuated was chosen for maximum impact on future operations. You're treating people like resources, Ahsoka accused during one transport selection. She'd been helping evacuate younglings, her face streaked with tears and soot. Like ammunition to be expended, because that's what they are now, Guilliman replied, not unkindly. In war, sentiment is a luxury. Every person saved must serve a purpose, or we're just prolonging suffering without strategic benefit. That's horrible. That's survival. Guilliman knelt to her level, still towering over her, even kneeling. I don't like it either, but I've learned this lesson too many times. If you let emotion govern tactics, you lose. Everyone loses. The only mercy in war is winning quickly. And if winning makes us like Sidious, then we lose ourselves but save others. Guilliman's expression softened slightly. It's not a good choice, but it's the only choice that preserves any possibility of something better. On the final day, as the last transports lifted off and Imperial forces breached the outer defenses, Guilliman stood with the Jedi Masters on a Senate landing platform. Below, clone troopers fought each other, freed soldiers covering the evacuation against their conditioned brothers. The city burned. The temple, the ancient, sacred Jedi temple, was a smoking ruin. "What have we accomplished?" Mace asked, staring at the devastation. "We stopped nothing, saved a fraction of who we might have. The Empire rises anyway. We accomplished chaos," Guilliman said, disrupted Sidious's clean transformation. Instead of a unified empire rising from a defeated republic, he has a fractured galaxy, active resistance, and an opposition with legitimate claim to republic succession. He gestured to the burning city. "It's not victory, but it's not the complete defeat he planned." "Small comfort," Obi-Wan muttered. "In war, small comforts are sometimes all that's available." Guilliman turned to face them. "This is where we part ways." The Jedi Masters went still. "You're leaving?" Anakin asked. "My presence here complicates things. I'm not force-sensitive, can't hide like you can, and I'm too visible. A 9-foot warrior in Primarch armor tends to attract attention." Guilliman's smile was bitter. "More importantly, I need to return to what I understand. War, strategy, building something that can actually hurt Sidious rather than just survive him." "You're going to build an army," Mace said, understanding. "I'm going to build a times weapon asterisk," Guilliman corrected. "Using Dooku's information, using freed clones, using every resource the Separatist holdings can provide. The Confederacy is leaderless now, Dooku dead, Grievous hunted by Imperial forces. Their manufacturing capacity is intact but directionless. I can give it direction. That's dangerous," Yoda warned. "To fight darkness with darkness, to build weapons from enemy resources familiar. This path leads to places best avoided." "Perhaps," Guilliman acknowledged. "But I'm not asking your blessing, Master Yoda. I'm informing you of my intent. You build your rebellion your way, preserve your ideals, maintain moral high ground, inspire hope. I'll build mine my way, brutal, efficient, designed to make the Empire pay in blood for every system it holds." "Two rebellions," Obi-Wan said thoughtfully. "One of ideals, one of pragmatism. The Empire will have to fight both," Guilliman said. "And that division of focus might be what saves you. Sidious can't crush inspiration and eliminate strategic threats simultaneously. He'll have to choose, and whatever he chooses, something survives." Captain Rex approached, his armor scorched from battle. "Sir, last transport is loaded. We need to move." Guilliman nodded, then turned back to the Jedi. "One more thing. The clones. The ones who executed Order 66, many did it against their will. The chips forced compliance. When you have the capacity, remove those chips. Give them the choice I gave Rex and his brothers. They're victims too, even after what they've done?" Anakin asked, bitterness in his voice. Asterisk. "Especially times after what they've done," Guilliman corrected. "Forcing someone to kill their friends is a cruelty beyond death. They deserve freedom from that, deserve the chance to choose their own path forward." He paused. "Even if that path is hunting me down for creating this mess, at least it will be their choice." He boarded the final transport, Rex and a company of freed clones with him. As the ship lifted off, Guilliman watched Coruscant recede, the capital of a fallen republic, birthplace of a new empire, graveyard of 10,000 years of Jedi history. Somewhere down there, Sidious was consolidating power, purging opposition, building his military-industrial machine, transforming a galaxy through fear and authority and the promise of order. Guilliman had seen it before. In his own galaxy, his father's Imperium, and he'd spent 10,000 years learning how to break it. "Set course for Separatist space," he ordered. "We have an empire to dismantle." In his throne room, no longer Chancellor's office, now openly acknowledged as the seat of Imperial power, Darth Sidious stared at intelligence reports. The Jedi scattered but surviving. Rebellious systems coalescing around Organa, Separatist holdings going dark, their factories operating but not responding to Imperial authority. And somewhere out there, the Primarch, building something. "My lord," an Imperial officer approached cautiously. "Our forces have secured the Senate district, but casualties were extensive. The freed clones fought with tactics we've never encountered. Some kind of advanced training protocol." "Guilliman," Sidious said softly, "teaching them to be more than weapons, making them dangerous." He smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Fascinating and problematic. Should we prioritize finding him?" "No." Sidious leaned back, his ravaged face thoughtful. "Let him build his little army. Let him think he's disrupting my plans. The longer he focuses on military opposition, the less attention he pays to the real transformation occurring." His eyes glittered. Empires aren't built through conquest alone. They're built through culture, through generational conditioning, through making tyranny seem normal, even desirable. "Then the Primarch isn't a threat?" "He's the best kind of threat, one that keeps my enemies focused on fighting rather than thinking. While he builds armies and strikes at military targets, I'll be transforming what it means to be a citizen of this galaxy. And by the time he realizes the true battleground..." Sidious's smile widened. "It will already be lost." The officer bowed and retreated, leaving the Sith Lord alone with his triumph. Incomplete, yes. Messier than planned, certainly, but ultimately successful. The Republic had fallen, the Empire had risen, and all the resistance in the galaxy couldn't change that fundamental reality, or so he believed. Years would pass before Sidious understood his mistake, before he realized that chaos was harder to control than order. That a galaxy fractured couldn't be easily unified, that the Primarch from another reality wasn't playing the game Sidious expected. Because Guilliman wasn't trying to defeat the Empire, he was trying to ensure it devoured itself. And on a nameless moon in former Separatist space, standing before 20,000 freed clone troopers and the captured factories of a dozen droid foundries, Roboute Guilliman began the work he knew best, building something that could fight gods, even if those gods wore the face of emperors. "Brothers," he addressed the assembled soldiers, his voice carrying across the temporary base. "You were made to be slaves. Bred to obey, conditioned to die for those who owned you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But you are free now. And free men, true free men, they choose what's worth dying for. Choose what's worth times killing times 4. The clones stood silent, attentive, their faces all identical, yet somehow unique, now turned toward him. "I offer you a choice," Guilliman continued. "Walk away. Find lives beyond war, or stay. Help me build something that terrifies emperors and makes tyrants hesitate." His eyes blazed with purpose. "Help me forge an army not of slaves, but of free soldiers who fight because they times choose times to. Not for Republic or Empire or any government's agenda, but for each other, for the brothers beside you, for the galaxy we decide is worth preserving." He raised the Emperor's sword, its impossible light cutting through the darkness. "I am Roboute Guilliman, and I am going to teach you how to kill gods." 20,000 voices answered as one, no longer the synchronized response of programmed soldiers, but the unified roar of warriors who had chosen their path. And in that moment, the war truly began. Not the war Sidious planned, not the war the Jedi imagined, but something else, something unexpected. The war for what comes after empires fall. The galaxy would burn for decades before the Empire fell. Billions would die, worlds would be shattered, and the name Roboute Guilliman would become legend, some calling him savior, others naming him destroyer, most simply fearing the Golden Warrior who taught soldiers they could be more than weapons. He never saw his own galaxy again, never returned to the Imperium he'd spent 10,000 years serving. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the universe force, or chaos, or simple cosmic coincidence had placed him here not to save one galaxy, but to prevent another from repeating his home's mistakes. Or perhaps he simply became what he'd always been, a weapon forged by necessity, pointed at tyranny, and given just enough humanity to know when to stop. The Clone Wars ended not with peace, but with transformation. The Republic died not with a whimper, but with revelation. And the Jedi, scattered and hunted, learned that sometimes surviving requires compromises their philosophy never prepared them for. But they survived, and in survival carried seeds of something better, or at least, something different. History would debate Guilliman's impact for generations, whether his interventions saved or damned this galaxy, whether his methods were justified or simply another form of tyranny. But standing in the ruins of what was, looking toward the uncertain future of what might be, one truth remained. The Primarch had kept his promise. He'd shown them the truth. All of it. The lies they'd believed, the chains they'd worn, the transformation waiting in the shadows. And in showing them, he'd given them the only weapon that mattered. Choice. What they did with it, that was their burden now. His was simply to ensure they had the chance to choose, even if that meant becoming the monster they needed, even if it cost him everything, even if, in the end, he was forgotten. Some sacrifices have no monuments. Some warriors have no graves. They simply fade into legend, their names becoming stories parents tell children about the time the galaxy broke and something held it together just long enough for something new to grow. Roboute Guilliman, Lord Commander of an Imperium that never existed here, became that story. And across the stars, in scattered cells and hidden bases, freed clone soldiers taught the next generation something their creators never intended. That being made for war doesn't mean accepting it. That following orders isn't the same as choosing your path. That brothers are not defined by genetics, but by who stands beside you when everything burns. The Empire would last for decades. The rebellion would fight for generations. But somewhere in that struggle, in the spaces between tyranny and freedom, soldiers who'd been slaves remembered a warrior who taught them they could be more. And that memory, more than any weapon or strategy or fleet, that was what empires truly feared. Is greater than, is greater than, is greater than. May the Force be with you. More stories await.